G'day everybody, AOS Coach here, bringing you the next faction focus, and it is going to be a bloody one. Whew. I can't believe we got these two legends on the line. The very first person I want to introduce is the bloodthirster of incessant rage, Matt Campbell, winner of CanCon, master of Khorne. Say hello to everyone.
The technical term is mighty lord of Khorne, but hi, I'm Matt. Yeah, I've been playing Khorne for just over 2 years now. They're definitely my main army. I have played a bit of destruction on the side, but Khorne is definitely what I keep coming back to at the moment. Yeah, basically they're everything I like in an army. Very fast moving, combat heavy. I took them to CanCon earlier this year, got obviously a really good result winning that one, and have taken them to the last 2 Masters tournaments we've had. So I've got a fair bit of experience, if nothing else, with the Khorne.
You only beat like 200 odd players at CanCon to take that top mantle. Like it's not like a one day. We're talking like one of the biggest events, or probably the biggest event in the world. So, very lucky to have you.
Oh, thanks.
And another man who I'm very happy to have. First time on the channel, we have Pat from Measured Gaming. Pat, what's your if Matt's the mighty lord of Khorne, are you a Wrathmonger? Are you a
No, we're all mighty lords.
All mighty lords.
I'm probably the mighty lord of mortal Khorne or Bloodbound.
Yeah.
That's more in the demon business, as it were.
Yes, definitely.
So Pat, who are you?
Yeah, so Khorne-wise, I picked them up with the box set back in, 2017. 2016, I wasn't really into them until the release of the first Blades of Khorne battle tome. That gave them all their character. And as soon as I discovered Blood Tithe, I pretty much fell in love with them. So for anyone that doesn't know Khorne, Blood Tithe is their main mechanism for the allegiance. A unit gets destroyed, you get a point of Blood Tithe, you spend it to do tricks or summon demons. And it's just the best mechanic ever. It's immersive, and any unit gets destroyed. So while you're sitting there getting the crap kicked out of you, you're just rubbing your hands waiting to see whether you can summon a Bloodthirster or something like that.
Reminds me a little bit of the AFL. I'm not a big AFL fan, but you get a point for missing in AFL. So even if like your unit's destroyed, like you're winning. Like, yep. Cool, I get Blood Tithe, and like I'm still getting points for doing nothing.
Yeah, it's the whole Khorne cares not where the blood flows from thing, and neither should you. If you play Khorne long enough, you'll have a moment where you deliberately destroy one of your own units just so you can get that one bit of Blood Tithe to pull off that stupid charge that'll win you the game or something like that. It's just the best mechanic.
Love it. And you're from a pretty famous gaming club as well.
Measured Gaming, Pride of Bendigo. Might be a few of the boys online, I don't know.
I'm looking in the chat, and there's no salt or any shit talking just yet, so no. I'm sure they'll come soon.
I did promise the guys I would try and rub one out under my computer desk on the live feed at some point.
We had a discussion before we went live. What to say?
Oh, wow.
So if I go a bit quiet, yeah.
All right, I'll be turning off the video camera. So I'm going to quickly move us along here, and I hope you guys appreciate the effort I've got into this video, because I've got a Khorne hat on, and I've got a new debuting sign that says "Blood for the Blood God." I had to go backwards. I had to do a reverse, so the mirror actually worked.
Oh, okay.
All right. So for people who are watching stream, I hope you're enjoying that. So let's get into this faction focus, and one that I'm really excited about, because Khorne has gone through a number of books, almost probably equal to Stormcast. And we've got a brand new book that's just hit the shelves. It's probably Khorne players who are looking for what's the new way to build an army. There are some people who are really excited about all the blood and the gore and the models, and they're thinking about starting up a new army. So let's throw it off to you guys. Who are Khorne? What is the Blades of Khorne? What is Khorne in general? Is it the band, or is it something different? Throw it over to you guys.
All right. So Khorne is definitely not the wonderful band that you are repping. Khorne, first and foremost, is one of the 4 original Chaos Gods. Sorry, Tom and Dan, but the Horned Rat doesn't really count. And Khorne is the oldest of the 4 sort of brothers of Chaos. He's also the one who is most powerful most of the time, because Khorne, as most of you will know, is powered by bloodshed and combat and war. And so when the 4 Chaos Gods, 5 if you count the Verminous one, all sort of come into conflict, Khorne is automatically fueled by that power. So although Chaos, waxes and wanes, and all 4 of them sort of are in ascendancy at different points, Khorne always eventually comes back on top more often than not.
Pat, anything you want to add about who Khorne is?
He's the god. He's a bit schizophrenic in that Khorne cares not where the blood comes from. So he's a god of slaughter, but he's also a god of warriors. So he really does care about high quality skulls, which is always a bit strange.
I think the big saying has always been around: blood for the blood god, skulls for the throne of Khorne.
Yep.
Awesome.
Yeah, and he doesn't care about the skulls, except he really does, because that's how you progress in your Khornage, by slaying mightier heroes.
Yeah, so the blood he's not picky on. That's anyone. The more blood, the better, friend or foe. Skulls, he really wants the top-notch skulls.
Oh, nice one. I never thought of that.
There you go. Timestamp that. If you like blood, if you like skulls, if you like taking the skulls of your enemies and drinking your beer or your beverage of choice through the skull of your opponent and licking the tears off their face, this is the army for you, because it loves combat. And you guys have been playing it for a long time. So what attracted you guys to this Khorne force?
I like the models.
Okay.
I just love the models. Basically, it suits my play style. It just when I play Khorne, it's just a bunch of guys screaming, running across the table, and hoping to come out on top at the end of a bloodbath.
Matt,
there's a little bit more to it than that, but for Mortal Khorne, that's how I play them, and that's how they work for me.
I'm pretty similar, to be honest. I find when I play Age of Sigmar, the reason I first got into the hobby when I was playing, or Age of Sigmar, when I was playing Destruction, was because the 2 phases I found that you sort of interact with most with your opponents, the movement phase and the obviously charge phase being sort of part of that movement phase, is the movement and the combat elements, because where you've moved will influence where your opponent's moved. And when the combat phase is obviously sort of something you do together with your opponent. Magic in the hero phase and shooting, I always find a bit, I'll do this and then you'll get to do yours in 5 minutes time. So I much prefer the way Khorne plays, where you get a lot more interaction with your opponent, because that's really what Warhammer is at its best. It's a conversation with a really cool person, and you get to take each other's battle dollies off the table while you do it.
Yeah. Khorne's a fun army to play with or against.
Yeah, I agree with you guys both. And for me, Khorne is basically as advertised. You look at Khorne, you hear about it. It's about combat and blood. It's literally what you're going to get. There's no hidden tricks. That's what you're going to get. And you guys are 100% right. When I've always played, like Matt, I've played you a few times. I've played some other Khorne opponents. It's always a good game, and it is a very interactive game. And it's not going to be a time where you're sitting back just watching someone roll millions of dice and millions of re-rolls, and you're waiting for a turn. It's literally back forth. So the tempo is really good.
Yeah, I got double turned by a cunning ruck the other week. Oh God! Half an hour of misery.
Yeah, so this is a really good interactive game. As an opponent, I don't play Khorne, but as someone who's played against Khorne many times, it's always a good game. And and you just laugh because it's about bloodshed and the dice are fickle.
For sure.
So if I was thinking about starting up a Khorne army, what are the strengths that Khorne's force gives us?
Okay, so with the new book, I would probably say that it's definitely still combat orientated, but the best thing about the new book is that you can pretty much pick any model in the range, and there's a way to build that into at least a semi-competitive force. Back in the old book, there was probably a few right, quote-unquote, ways of doing Khorne. A lot of it in Australia revolved around using gore pilgrims of some sort. Because of some of the changes they've made in this book, they've made pretty much every build you can think of with a few tweaks viable. So to be honest, I would look at a unit or a handful of units you really like the look of, really like the rules for. I would immediately go to the Slaughter Tribes, if I'm remembering, that's what they're called or something. I would immediately go there, see if any of those are going to influence on you, check out the Battalions, see if they're going to influence on you, and sort of build from there.
Yeah, there's a lot of viable builds. And there's viable builds that we haven't even touched on in the Khorne meta so far.
For sure.
So there's a lot of flexibility, and I guess as a hobbyist, I can find something that I really like and build around it, as opposed to maybe some of the armies where there is a build.
Yeah, well, provided you like combat, because it's all combat.
Well, if you're coming to Khorne for shooting, you might want to show them the door really quickly, because this is not the army for you.
You want to dance around with
or your name is Chris Welfare.
And how did that go for him at that event where he brought in a Zench model?
Not so great, but Wrathmongers could make him pretty good as long as Games Workshop are nice to us. And we'll get to that, I'm sure.
I did, to my shame, I did actually ally a sorcerer into a list once. And yeah, I went 3 and 2, but nah, I don't like to talk about it.
Yeah, Khorne punishes those.
God.
If you don't go into combat, or if you are hesitant, or if you go into magic, you get punished by Khorne. Like, it's obvious.
The anti-magic in Khorne is so strong. The Hexgorger Skulls are going to change the face of the game, for sure. So I'd say if you're a new Khorne guy, that would be about the only auto include I'd go with. Slaughter Priests and the Skulls.
Awesome. So we've heard a little bit about the strengths. So they're good in combat. You know, they're a really good hobby army. You can build around it. There's lots of choices. It's an interactive army. What are some of the weaknesses that you need to consider when you're building your army, or what is Khorne not good at?
They're slow by AOS 2 standards, and they got a lot slower. Actually, Bloodbound probably got a bit quicker with a certain build, but Demons definitely got very much slower in the new edition compared to a lot of other armies. You know, Bloodthirsters are just not going to make it across the table turn 1 on a 24-inch deployment.
Yeah. They're not as slow as Dispossessed. Like we've got slow, but we've got like Dispossessed slow.
But compared to in AOS 2, pretty much everyone can get across the table turn 1. Khorne can't. Not reliably at all.
Yeah.
What else? What other weaknesses? No magic, of course. No movement shenanigans. And other than that, they don't really have vastly powerful heroes for mortals. So if you're going Mortal Khorne, it's pretty much a bunch of guys with weak-ass heroes following them up. And if you're going Bloodthirsters, you're going to be very vulnerable to shooting.
What about magic? Is this an army that, if I enjoy magic, I'm going to find within Khorne?
Hell no. No.
Why is that?
Well, Khorne doesn't do anything for magic, and all of the Khorne anti-magic stuff in the new edition will affect your own wizards as well if you ally them in. So I'm going to talk a bit about the Hexgorger skulls later.
Mhm.
But they give neg 2 to casting, and they blow people up on a natural roll of 8, and that will affect their own wizards.
Right. So if you're someone who's coming in from a Zench or a Legions of Nagash or some other magic-based army, and you're like, "Yep, cool, I'm going to bring the same strategy to Khorne."
There are people who say prayers and the judgments are basically spells, but yeah, they're wrong.
So you do have a prayer mechanic. I think that's definitely something that's unique to this army as well. Is you've got prayers.
Yep. I think we're the first of the AOS 2 books to come out with prayers, so I have a suspicion everyone else will pretty much follow us along. I had a look at the Fire Slayer judgments today, and they're basically, whatever they're called, they're basically the same as the Khorne prayer things.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you like magic, no. If you like dancing around your opponent or tactical movement or all that sort of stuff, yeah, it's not going to happen for you.
Yeah.
So play Khorne, you really have to want to get stuck in.
Matt, is there any other weaknesses that you'd want to call out from a Khorne point of view? So we've talked a bit about the anti-magic. We've talked a little bit about it's not really a shooting army. I think Pat's covered it kind of quite well.
What I will say is I think it was unfair that Pat was talking about taking a wizard and I still got kicked from the chat. That's not right.
This is true. We actually held and tried to I tried to fake it that
and
that Matt wasn't there, and
I was just about to suggest we get rid of Pat for taking a Zinch model. Jeez.
No, it was a Nurgle Chaos Social Lord.
Oh,
Khorne is a very spiteful god, and he punishes those who don't believe.
In terms of other weaknesses, it's not really a weakness in general because we're still all right at it. But compared to last edition of books, you might say, certainly with regards to the demons, we have got quite a bit slower than we were. So we lost the run and charge from the Wrath of Khorne. The Bloodstoker no longer works on demons. So you might find the demons, while they still hit really hard and are reasonably quick, they're not going to be as quick as they were before. And so if you want to alpha strike with demons, you got to think outside the box, think of different ways to get them into combat, and then obviously move them around more. It's all right for me because I was using a lot of my blood tithes to move and make charges and retreats and stuff anyway. But I think Khorne players are going to have to get more used to that, especially with summoning taking a bit of a hit in this edition too.
Shocking enough.
Some of us put demons in our original list, Pat.
Yeah, just I didn't actually realise until I read the rules, but you can't daisy chain summon anymore.
Yeah, you can do it off the altar now, which I think
is good,
useful. Yeah, but that definitely took a hit. So we're probably not as mobile as we once were, but I think we hit more of a punch now than ever before. So really we are talking about hero phase has now stepped up and potentially become the second most important phase for Khorne, potentially even above that movement phase.
I was a bit disappointed in the demons. I mean, they lost a prime opportunity to unfuck the Bloodletter. And all they had to do was give him one extra attack. Problem solved.
Yeah, I think Bloodletters are now in a position where you're going to see 10s going on the board. I'm not sure how viable big 30s are at the moment. But certainly I think 10s are better than they were because they got a little bit cheaper. But yeah, I mean, Bloodletters probably aren't the strongest demons we have access to, but they made up for it by buffs to skull cannons, seemingly, before FAQ comes out.
All right, it looks like
Fleshhounds.
It looks like we're moving into unit choices. I think this is kind of like the nice segue into how do we actually build an army. So do we want to continue this discussion on Battleline, or do we want to start at the top of the tree and talk heroes?
The top of the tree is demon or mortal.
All right, that's probably even better choice. So before we get into that, what is the demon versus mortal? What is this we've been talking about so far?
Okay, so You've got Mortal Khorne, Demon Khorne, and Bloodbound Mortal. You just throw them in with Mortal, and their buffs don't work on each other.
So basically, this is a key word that's sitting on the war scroll that will define if I'm a demon, if I'm a bloodbound mortal. Is that correct?
Yes. Yep.
So crucially, the one other faction we haven't mentioned in there, just it's relatively recent to us, but Beasts of Chaos have a formation which will also go into Khorne. And when we go through some of the units, I will be chucking some beasts out because I think that formation has real legs.
I'm definitely
in a Khorne
army later in the year in the process of getting them.
All right, so stay tuned and make sure you listen to the whole episode because we're going to hear how Beasts of Chaos align to this. But we're talking, so we start at the top of the tree and you're thinking, do I start with mortals? Do I start with demons? And then that kind of flows down into our choices.
Well, the first model is a Bloodsecrator. That's probably what I don't like about the new edition. They just, pure Demon Khorne just doesn't have any legs unless it's nothing but Flesh Hounds, the old Blood Hunt, more or less.
I would disagree. But as you say, you sort of operate more in the mortals. I certainly have some quite strong demon options that I'm sure we can look at as we go through, which are going to be really good options for us. How about we start off and both talk about, if you want to talk about the mortals, I'll talk about the demons, and we can talk about some strong choices for the heroes within the army.
The first option for any mortal army, and I'd say for most demon armies, is a Bloodsecrator.
Correct.
Even into the new rules, he's still good.
Why is that, Pat? Why if someone starting a Khorne army is going for a Bloodsecrator, what makes that good?
Well, he's a totem. He's got a 16-inch bubble of +1 attack to anything wholly within it. And it also makes opponents reroll successful casts in that range. And that is just the meat and drink of Khorne. So +1, +2, or +3 attacks if you're mortal, that's basic Khorne.
And in terms of changes between the last edition and this one, so the range has got slightly smaller on him. So he's 16 inches instead of 18 inches, and you have to be wholly within to get that +1 attack buff. So you have to be wholly within 16 inches. The good thing, however, is that he can move, and you don't have to plant the totem in your hero phase. So that is always on. So even if you take second turn and your opponent charges your front line, if you've deployed them all within 16, wholly within 16 of that Bloodsecrator banner, they've got the +1 even before you have a turn.
And that's actually really good because it's the same with Wrathmongers, and you can switch on your Aspiring Deathbringer in the combat phase.
And and just remind me, this is a change that's happened in the new book because in the old book, you would have to declare if they're going to plant their totem, which meant that they couldn't move, and that's when you got the benefit. But now you don't have to declare that, and you're automatically getting a benefit by having the banner. That's correct?
Yeah, it's a passive ability now. So it's just on his thing, doesn't mention the banner, he just has it as he walks around the battlefield. If a unit with the Khorne keyword has all of its models wholly within 16 of the banner, then they get +1 attack. If your opponent or any wizard is within 16, I don't think that has to be wholly within, just within 16, you have to re-roll successful casts.
Which, as an opponent, is a pain in the ass, especially with some of the high casting roll spells that I choose.
Can actually bite you on the ass against legions. There's a number of times they re-roll a successful cast and then roll a 10 for the double effect. It's pretty
is it always you have to re-roll, or can you choose
always.
when to re-roll?
Always, even if you run a wizard yourself, you have to do it.
Okay, so it's not like, because there are some, like, for example, I remember I played a never chosen army with the War Shrine, and with that re-roll number, it's an optional. Do I apply the effect? But it sounds like in this case, yes, there is a time where they're going to have to re-roll, and there are some armies, well, on that 10+ or 9+, they actually get better benefits if they cast higher.
It's bloody annoying.
So it's something to consider.
Yeah, but it's a passive effect, and it's a lot of fun. Especially if they roll a 12 first or something like that. No, you better re-roll that.
Also gives you a chance to, we'll talk more to them when we get to the blessings, but the Hex Gorgeous Skulls just gives them another chance to roll that 8 for you, which is big.
Awesome. And we will get to that. It's like once we've started building this army list and what a good army looks like, then it's like, how do we customize it with prayers, endless spells, artifacts, all that good stuff. So Pat, you've said the Blood Secretor.
Blood Secretor he just goes in every list. Actually, yeah, probably definitely a Blood Stoker as well. If you're running Mortal, he's good.
With Mortals, definitely.
He's actually went to a holy within 8 inches for his whip, so you've got to be careful where you position him. But now he re-rolls all wounds, so he's better.
This is Mr. Whippy, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Yep. He is far better now. Because Mortals, unless you're taking the big blobs of Blood Reavers, most of your units are going to be pretty easy to fit inside that 8 inches. And re-rolling all the wounds, if you're talking especially about Blood Warriors, Blood Reavers, those guys wound on 4s, and that's always been where they've been let down. And so getting to re-roll all of them, especially now that Blood Warriors can potentially kick out so much damage, is massive.
Oh, they can. They're awesome. Yeah.
So do we want to keep going with the Mortals? Because I might prompt Pat here because he'll know more about them, but Slaughter Priests to me are another must-have.
Actually, if you really want to run Mortals, I'd take a War Shrine as an auto-include now. Absolutely.
Yeah. So let's talk about the Slaughter Priest first, and then let's make sure we talk about the War Shrine. So why are we taking Slaughter Priests?
Prayers. So prayers the Slaughter Priest comes with his own 2 prayers. Blood Boil, which is your classic 16 inches D6 mortal wounds, which is pretty much the only range mortals a Khorne army is going to get. And he gets a prayer from the army, which is a buff prayer of some description, and they're all good.
He also gets Blood Bind, which is the alternative to Blood Boil, which is the come closer to my unit one. So if you roll that, instead of doing D6 mortal wounds, you can make an opponent unit run towards your closest unit, which means...
Not as good as it used to be. It got nerfed.
No? What is it now?
It's just a result of the prayer in inches. So if you roll a 5... I actually use it on Joel just to pull a unit of Demonettes off a unit through his screening unit. So it's not terrible, but it's not nearly as good as it used to be.
You know what? It's still useful because you're going to have to roll at least a 4 to get them moving, which, you know, if you're looking at the difference between a 10-inch and a 6-inch charge by the end of your turn, can certainly be more useful than D6 mortal wounds sometimes.
On the edge of an objective or something, it's still a useful prayer and a good second option.
Yeah. For sure.
The prayers also summon the judgments.
And just to rewind, because this is the first time we've talked about a judgment. So what is a judgment?
The endless spell equivalent of Khorne.
All right. So if you're playing an army that has endless spells, there is an equivalent despite not having magic. Nope. In Khorne, call it judgment. Let's tell me more.
They're not. Everyone seems to think that they're just different endless spells, but they actually play very differently on the table. So there are 3 judgments. And you need to roll. This is where actually back up. The first thing you need to buy if you're playing Khorne is the War Shrine piece. The terrain piece?
The Skull Altar.
Skull Altar. Because if you're within 8, it does a lot of cool stuff, and if you're within 8 inches of it, your priests re-roll all their prayers.
Okay, so we've got some synergies already happening just purely through the allegiance. So you get that terrain piece. You're going to be able to re-roll some prayers, which is great.
So basically, that's where you're going to center your army. So unlike an endless spell, a judgment is a straight roll depending on what it is. So the Hex Gorgeous Skulls come up on a 3-up. They move around sort of like endless spells, except your opponent can't move them.
Great.
They move in your hero phase. So on a 3-up re-rollable, your Hex Gorgeous Skulls pop up within 8 inches of your priest, and they can move 8 inches. And unlike endless spells, they'll disappear at the end of the battle round on a roll of a 5-up. They don't. They stay, or a 4-up if they're within 12 inches of a priest.
Or the Skull Altar.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Yeah, so that's another decent thing about the Skull Altar. It's not massive, but once you add that our old allegiance ability used to just be Blood Tithe, now we've got the Skull Altar and the Locus of Fury for all of the demon heroes, which is reroll 1s to hit when you're nearby a demon hero for demons. It just gives us more tools in the toolbox, so to speak.
Yeah, but I think we're doing the judgments later, the specifics of them, but they're good.
Cool.
Yeah.
So to summarize what we've talked about from a mortal point of view, we've got the Blood Secretor, we've got the Blood Stoker, we've got the Slaughter Priest, and we've got the War Altar, which are definitely some of these heroes that are certainly first choice for you when you're building a mortal army. Is that correct?
Mortal, take a War Shrine.
Why?
They do everything a Slaughter Priest does except for the Blood Boil. So they can cast your judgments, they can cast your buffing prayers. They've got twice the wounds, a 4-up save, and a 9-inch bubble. And their prayer is re-rolling all hits.
Do you take both, or do you just take one of them?
Honestly, if I had to, I'd be running to.
No, sorry. I'll clarify. Would you take a Slaughter Priest and a War Shrine?
Absolutely.
Yes. So definitely including both as opposed to one or the other.
You're spending the points for a judgment, having one guy that can cast it, because it's not an endless spell. You're going to have to cast it again and again and again over the course of a battle. So just having one guy that can cast your spell is just asking him to get knocked on the head.
Yeah, I also think it's worth having, because worst case scenario, even if you're not doing your blood sacrifice prayer, you don't want to go down that route, which I tend not to. Just having 2 things on the board, if a Slaughter Priest did nothing else but give me +1 to hit or +1 to save, he'd still probably find his way into my list. And he can do that and so much more. So I'd agree. In a demon list, I'd be taking a Slaughter Priest every time. In a mortal list, I'd be taking both the War Shrine and at least one Skull and at least one Slaughter Priest.
In a Khorne Dragon list, I'd be taking 2 War Shrines. Double bubble on him. It'd be good.
And there's another hero choice, surprise of the century. The Khorne Dragon is a Khorne hero choice.
It's his own army at 1,200 points. It's not.
Yeah.
You just take him and build around him. I think it's more of a fun thing. But
what do we think of the dragon? What do we like it? Is it worth the 1,200 points?
I wish he'd been smaller. I think he's too big. I would not have minded so much if he was a bit smaller and he was 800 points and you could get a bit more change out of him. You know, make him Archaon and Nagash and sort of that level of top tier hero. Because I think at the moment you're just not getting enough army left over for it to be overly fun for me.
And he has the worst wound profile of any monster I've ever seen. His bottom bracket is the last 10 wounds, and it puts him down to 1 tail attack or something absurd like that.
I mean, it does have 30 wounds, and it'd probably be remiss of me to clarify that it's actually a woman. The dragon is a female, and the rider is a male. And I believe the narrative is that they actually hate each other, but Khorne has bound them together. But
that's quite good.
It's quite funny actually when you think about it that the rider, the dragon actually hates the monster, the rider. But it's 1,200 points if you want to run a dragon, and a big dragon at that. Probably the biggest model in Age of Sigmar. You get what you pay for, but it does kind of restrict you. And
I don't think it's a competitive choice. Awesome model though.
Yeah, if you want a big Khorne grizzly, come see me and my demons for the Exalted Greater Demon. It's cheap enough that you're still going to get some army there. It's not a unique character, so it can get some command traits, some artifacts on it. You can stick it in a formation. It's still a big, impressive centerpiece model, but you're not going to be blowing your whole load on one model. And while the Khorne Dragon army is fun, Deke, you really don't get a whole lot else to play with.
Yeah, it's not competitive.
No, but it's a good model. We've talked models. I want to get into demons. So we've got one side of the build. And obviously, when we're talking about this stuff, you know, this is your hobby. And if you love a certain model, play with it and build it and have fun with it. I guess we're talking a bit more like an optimized Khorne list. So we've heard a bit about the mortals and Pat's recommendations. I'd love to hear the demon side. So when we're starting to build the demon list, what are those hero choices and why?
Okay, so with demons, I really would recommend starting off by finding a formation for them. The three sort of main contenders that you'll see are going to be Tyrants of Blood, which is, if like me, you love Bloodthirsters, certainly is going to be something I'm going to be playing in the immediate future.
Yep. Easily Italian for demons.
Yeah, so that is 3 to 8 Bloodthirsters of any kind, including Scarbrand or the Exalted. Then you've got the Blood Hunt, which is really cool because it encourages you to take Karanak and the Fleshhounds, which are really cool new models. And then also has a Wrath of Khorne Bloodthirster in there. So that's good all around, and gives you +1 to wound against heroes. And again, when we were talking about wounding being a real weak spot for Khorne, Fleshhounds are 3s/4s. Getting that to 3s/3s with their huge amount of attacks is massive. And then the last one is the Murder Host. So it's not as good as it used to be. It's not a free move, but what I would say is it is a free artifact. It gets your army moving faster, and you don't have to include a Bloodthirster within it. So if you can build a list where you go Tyrants of Blood to make the most of your Bloodthirsters, and then to fill out your battle line, if you want all of those Bloodthirsters to have an artifact, go for something like the Murder Host. It means that the Hounds or Bloodletters or Blood Crushers within are getting either +2 to run or +2 to charge, which is decent without being amazing, but it gives you that extra artifact, keeps the drops low, and it does make them a bit quicker. So I would look at what you want out of there as to where you're going with your heroes, because they will sort of tell you which demon heroes you have to take that way. But apart from that, just going over them quickly, you've got your heralds of any variety on a Blood Throne, on foot, on Juggernaut. These guys are there to buff. They're not going to do a whole lot of damage. They're there to give the locus out to demons, to be an extra character running around, to be part of those formations. So I won't spend too much time talking about them. Then you've got Karanak, who, while he's a hero, is not a leader. And that's an important distinction to make. So he won't take up one of your 6 leader spots when you're going through, but he does do things like score in places of power. He also hands out that locus to people. I hope they've done it on purpose, because I find it really cool that Karanak, you're getting no leadership value off him, but he's still heroic in his own right.
Kind of like similar to like the Black Coach in Nighthawk. It's not a leader.
Yeah, absolutely, just like that. He's basically a small combat hero who's quite quick. He can also summon down a unit of Fleshhounds if you get near a specific hero in your opponent's army. So right there, if you can do that, and you're confident of doing that, then Karanak is a great choice for your list, because suddenly you're like taking 100 points off his unit cost.
Well, he's 140 points and he summons a unit of Fleshhounds, then...
He used to summon in the movement phase.
Yeah, so he used to summon in the movement phase. Yeah, but just keeping in mind that that movement phase can also take into account a cheeky movement phase run with Karanak. So use your Blood Tithe at the start of the hero phase, run him to within, I think, 8 of your hero, very corny, and then the Fleshhounds come straight up. So that is what I would be keeping in mind with him. But he is also quite killy, especially against heroes, because he gets rerolls against them. He's Khorne's hunting dog. Then you've got Skull Taker, who is Khorne's favorite herald. So he, again, just loves fighting heroes, not much else. He's quite tanky. But the 3 heroes that I think you really should be looking at with demons are the 3 standard bloodthirsters. Because Scarbrand will do a lot of damage, but he's not adding a lot of subtlety to your list. But really, I think any Khorne demon list needs to take at least 1 bloodthirster in it. Because they're iconic, they're the archetypal demon. They'll do a lot of damage when they go in, for the most part, unless you roll terribly. But the Wrath of Khorne is sort of your all-rounder. A good hero. He's got a command ability where he grants rerolls to hit to demons nearby, which is awesome. Not as mobile as he used to be, but he's got a really underrated shooting profile. He rerolls to hit against heroes, and he's got a flat 6 damage whip on him. So you can be killing spare heroes running around like it's no one's business. Everyone's been talking about the Wrathmongers with the skull cannons, but not many people have been talking about the fact that if you've got a unit of Wrathmongers near that Wrath of Khorne Bloodthirster, suddenly he's shooting off 2 damage 6 whip attacks.
Oh, wow.
So you could be killing 2 little heroes there. And then, obviously, as you'd expect, he's got a pretty decent combat profile. So I believe it's 6 attacks, 3s by 2s. Of course, he's going to be re-rolling 1s to hit. Ren to D3 damage. So he will get stuck in the heroes. The Insensate Rage is pretty much what he's always been. He's just your combat beat stick. He will need buffs because he's 4s by 2s, and that is just too swingy to rely on, basically, because half your attacks are just going to miss.
You got an
But
extra.
he's the guy where if you roll an unmodified 6 to wound, he will explode and do damage, and that's gone up to 4 mortal wounds for every enemy unit within 8, which is just ridiculous. Because if you get 2 of those,
just run him in, drop those 6s, and you're blowing things up.
pretty much nothing fancy with him. The Unfettered Fury is the last one. He's definitely the weakest in terms of the profile, but you take him for his command ability because it allows demon units nearby to pile in 6 and to activate when they're 6 inches away from your opponent instead of 3. So what that means is you can run with him, use that at the start of the combat phase. As long as you're within 6, you can pile in anyway. You're not making a charge move, so that's fine. You can also guarantee that you're going to attack first because you just go 3.1 away from your opponent and pile in. They can't activate because they're outside of 3. You can activate because you're within 6. So that gets around Bristlegore, it gets around High Tide, all of those things you have to worry about. And it also means you can retreat out of combat, make sure you're at least 6 inches away from your opponent, pop that command ability, and you can still pile in. So that's sort of the rundown of what you could take. There's definitely a list there where you just take one of each of those, stick them inside Tyrants of Blood, and just have the best time ever.
Okay.
Awesome. Pat,
If you could only take 1 Bloodthirster, what would you take?
I'll be a bit annoying here.
you're going to say Scarbrand, aren't you?
No. God, no. Jeez, no.
Good. I was going to say, can't cheat.
I'd say really it depends what's in my list, other than that. But as an all-rounder, I would take the Wrath of Khorne Bloodthirster because he's just, you're too swingy with the Insensate Rage. Unfettered Fury is great at using that command ability to help out other Bloodthirsters, in my opinion, and other small demon units. But Wrath of Khorne is really self-sufficient. He'll go after your opponent's heroes and just take out those key synergy pieces. I've had turns before where he's gone into an opponent's army, killed a Branch Wraith, gone in and one-shotted a Lariel in combat. And then you get the double and he charges Durthu and kills him too. he's just a beat stick that will take out your opponent's key synergy pieces. So I'd be going for him. But why take one when you could take all three?
Good point. Plus, he's got natural +2 to spell, which is so damn useful.
Pat,
Yes.
which bloodthirst are you taking? Before we move on from leaders, because one thing that I find really fascinating from this discussion is that Blades of Khorne probably has one of the most robust leader choices alongside Stormcast with just the pure amount of leader choices you've got. So I imagine if I'm starting at the top of my tree and thinking, who's going to lead my force and what am I trying to achieve? This is really tough. You've got, I'm sure I could count this document, probably at least almost maybe close to 20 leader choices, which is just rough.
I'd be saying there's more than that too, because you've also got Slaves to Darkness, and you've got the Beast. You've got the Doom Bull and the Beast Lord. I'd say you'd be touching 30 if you counted them all up personally.
So first off, I want to know what Pat is, what's his favorite bloodthirster?
Wrath of Khorne.
Cool. So I guess before we move down to Battleline, if I'm thinking of Pat, I'm a mortal player and I'm looking at this overwhelming choice of leader choices, all from Slaves to Darkness, Blades of Khorne, Beasts of Chaos, everything in this book. What's the high level message you're giving to somebody when they're making their leader choices?
For a mortal army, your leader choices are buff pieces primarily. And you will probably end up taking 5 or 6 of them, just so you can get your buffs and your prayers off. And I tend to find that it's only the 6th slot in a pure mortal army that ever gets to do anything really interesting. That's when you take Scylla or Valkyr or Korgos or something like that. But for mortals, you look upon your leaders more as buff pieces than killing pieces.
Awesome.
They're just not that good at it.
And Matt, same question to you. I'm in the demon world and I'm building a list. I'm looking at all my demon choices. What's the high level message you're giving someone building that demon list?
I'm gonna flip what Pat said basically. You're gonna still use those mortals to buff you, even in a demon's list. I'm still taking a slaughter priest. I'm still taking a blood secrator, because those help Khorne units, not mortals or demons. They'll go either side. And while your demon heroes will buff you, especially with things like that locust going onto your other demon units, really the bloodthirsters are going to be your main damage pieces. We look at Karanak and Skulltaker, both damage pieces. The heralds, I mean, they're buff pieces, but they're not particularly worth talking about. They're all right. They're not great. But yeah, units like Fleshhounds, Bloodletters, they're more going to be your scoring units in a demon list, I feel. And you're going to be relying on your heroes to do a lot more of the heavy lifting, along with your skull cannons if they stay the same.
That's really good. It's really good. Again, I look at this and there's so many choices, but I think from what I'm hearing is definitely, obviously you've got your bloodthirster variety, which is your very big beat stick killies, but then you've got all these guys which are very support character orientated. Speaking of the supports, let's move to Battleline, and you've got 3 primary Battleline choices, which is your Bloodletters, your Blood Reavers, your Blood Warriors. And then depending on your leader choices,
Fleshhounds
are also,
yes, you've got your Fleshhounds, and then you unlock things based on the different leader choices. So where do you guys go for your battle line?
I go to whichever battalion I'm taking.
Why is that?
There's no battalions are cheap, and there's no good reason to take a Khorne army without one. So for me, it's either Blood Reavers or Blood Warriors, and that just depends on the battalion I'm going with.
The other mortal one to look out for.
Sorry,
I was just going to say the other mortal one to look out for is if you take that Lord on Jugger, the Skull Crushers too.
Skull Crushers.
If you're taking something like a Brass Stampede.
Yeah, that's so you look for your battle line from your basic core battalion. I always build around them, and they're cheap as dirt now, so there's no reason not to take 1 or 2. It just depends on what you want to do. All Khorne battle line are good. And so Blood Warriors are more resilient. If you want a bigger footprint, you take Blood Reavers. And again, they fit in excellent with the War Shrine. Your basic Blood Reaver gets 1 attack, but you're looking at Khorne mathematics. He gets an extra 1 for being within 16 inches of a totem, which is a War Shrine or a Blood Secretor. An extra 1 from the Blood Secretor himself, an extra 1 from your Aspiring Deathbringer, from your Wrathmonger. So you can put a Blood Reaver up to 5 or 6 attacks in the right battalion. And even then, with a couple of buffs, always take them with the 2-handed axes. And they'll do damage.
Why the 2-handed axes?
Just neg 1 rend.
Yeah, just an extra point. I think the only reason you go the Reaver Blades is because that's what you get in the starter set.
Yeah.
So you see a lot of those going out there, but you'd probably say the axes are the better choice if you had the choice. The other thing to keep in mind, Pat mentioned that they're getting +1 attack off the totem keyword for the Blood Secretor. Don't forget that your War Shrine also has that. So if you're running that up to keep that 6-inch bubble, to keep the 9-inch Feel No Pain bubble, you don't have to keep your banner right next to that unit of Reavers.
Yep. So if you take the, what is it, the Gore-Tide Slaughter Host, whatever they're called. If you take the Gore-Tide Storm Host or whatever it is, they've got a really good run and charge ability for battle line. And if you whip a unit of Blood Warriors or Blood Reavers, you can throw them more than 24 inches, which will inevitably run them out of a lot of the buff range, just for the sheer hilarity of it. And there's a really fun trick you can do with Blood Warriors. I did it to some of Joel's army in my last game. So you take a unit of Blood Warriors, you buff the living crap out of them, and you move them just enough across the table into a really killer unit of your opponents, like a blob of Demonettes or Witch Elves or something. And so they get their attacks off, 15, 20 attacks, re-rolling all their wounds and hits. Then they get attacked back. Your opponent will do 60 or 70 wounds to them or something. So you can wipe out, but they've got a 6-up mortal kickback. So you'll kick back, 6 or 8 wounds to them, and then they get to double pile in because they can attack back when they pile in.
Yeah.
So for the price of 100 points for a unit of crappy Blood Warriors, you can pretty much cripple a big killer unit. Just as a tip, I did it, and it's great fun.
That's awesome.
Blood Tithe, yeah. But yeah, it's, if you actually use them for combat and you expect them to die, they've got a double pile in.
So what I'm hearing from you guys, and Matt, maybe you have a different opinion on this, is that from a battle line perspective, when you're thinking about your battle line, a lot of that is dictated by the formation that you want to create around your army. That's what I'm hearing from Pat? Is that what I'm hearing from you, Matt?
I would agree in terms of the demon side of it, because you're getting it either from your Blood Crushers, your Flesh Hounds, or your Bloodletters. So again, you're going to get those through formations if you're taking them mostly. Yeah, I would say the Flesh Hounds are the ones that I like the most. They're easiest to keep wholly within. They do a load of attacks. They've got an unbind. They re-roll all their charges off their War Scroll. The Bloodletters, I'd take in units of 10. They can be good because they still kick out those mortal wounds on 6s.
Why not the large units? Because you used to see large units of Bloodletters of max to 30. Why are you saying the small unit?
So because there's no way to make them run and charge and whip them anymore, it's really unwieldy when you've got a move 5 unit with 30, 32 mil bases in. You're just not going to get them into combat. You're not going to get them in buffing range. You're just going to be spending a lot of points that aren't worth it. And it's also worth mentioning that their Horde discount stayed the same at 300, but instead of being 120, they're now 110.
Yeah.
So you're not getting as much of a discount for taking the big blob anymore.
And I guess to point out the obvious, if you take 3 units of 10 as opposed to 1 unit of 30, you get 3 blood tie when they die as opposed to the 1. So
absolutely, yeah. So really, you'd have to justify why you're taking the big unit of 30 rather than justify why you're taking the small numbers, especially when they're so easy to fit into those formations. You don't even have drops as a way to sort of excuse them anymore. I just don't think you'll see a lot of the big blobs.
I'm the same.
Maybe if you're planning on buffing them up, that would be the only reason. But I'd say you'll have better things to buff up, to be honest, because they're no longer something you can sling across the board at your opponent like you used to be able to. So I'd probably leave them. Other than that, I think Pat covered the mortals pretty well inside the Bloodbound. It's worth mentioning, if you really want to, you can get Marauders, Warriors, and Chaos Knights all as battle line through Slaves to Darkness. I would leave Warriors and Blood Reavers and Marauders alone unless you've got something specific in mind, because I think Blood Reavers and the Blood Warriors are just better generally. The Knights, you can definitely make a decent list that sort of buffs up a Knight unit for the mortal side. They can definitely be both a hammer and an anvil.
When you say Knights, we're talking Chaos Knights from Slaves to Darkness?
Knights. Yes, so Chaos Knights, I believe you have to take a Lord on Demonic Mount as your general, which is not a bad op, because he can give +1 to hit on those Knights. So really simply, if I take a Wrathmonger, sorry, not a Wrathmonger, what am I talking about? Wrathmongers would be great too, but if I take a Bloodstoker, a Lord on Demonic Mount, and a Slaughter Priest with the +1 to hit, it's really easy to get them to 2s to hit, 3s re-rolling to wound on all their attacks, and of course you can give them extra attacks on both the horses and the knights on top, and they'll turn into a wrecking ball. So they're worth looking at. And with the beasts, I would say look at Bulgors if you want to build another Death Star, or Bestigors, who are still really cheap for what they do, still very quick and pretty killy. So I would look at those as sort of your alternate battle line choices.
What do we think of something like Skull Crushers as battle line?
Skull Crushers, I think, can be good. Blood Crushers, I'd probably leave alone. But Skull Crushers, if you get them inside units of 6, they can do a lot of mortal wounds when they charge. They'll really punish you. I think you've got to keep them at that unit 6, because as soon as they go down to 5 models, then they don't do as many mortal wounds when they charge. But I would definitely say Master Gammy up in mango growing regions would definitely talk about the Skull Crushers as a really good battle line if you build your list around it.
Yeah, it's you take that battalion, that's what you're doing. I think a lot of the charging stuff it's going to look good on paper, but in a 5-game tournament, there'll be games where you just never get to do it. But the Skull Crushers are strong just with a bronze flesh buff. Your +1 attack buff goes a long way with them. You're looking at 8 attacks a model or something. They got really improved. Yeah.
There's definitely legs with them, because again, you can whip them. Suddenly, that charge is easier to get off, and they're re-rolling all their wounds. The one thing you want to sort of avoid with them is getting bogged down on the objectives with them, because they're not the best at killing certainly elite units. There's not a whole lot of rend in there, so if they get stuck on a unit of Sequitors, they will get stuck. So it might be worth, if you're taking them, especially in a Brass Stampede, to think about attacking in waves with them, because one can go in, smash off half that big anvil unit, and then the other can go in the next turn to really finish them off. That's what I would probably recommend if you're looking to do that, to keep in mind. But like a lot of the things we're going to talk about, there's nothing in this army that you should discount. Everything is viable if you build around it.
I will say this about Khorne battle line, particularly on the mortal side. I'm not so sure about the demons. You have to get work out of them.
What does that mean? What does that mean?
You can't have the old thing where you've just got 3 units of liberators that stand around in the backfield and don't do anything. You have to get work out of your battle line. So they have to go forward.
I think that's definitely the case with the mortals, because like Pat said, by the time you're spending all of those points on heroes, which aren't the most combat effective, suddenly if you've got battle line that aren't going to do anything either, you're talking about half your army's gone and you've not done any damage to your opponent yet.
Yeah.
So I would say I'd be looking at decent sized blocks of Blood Warriors or Blood Reavers who are actually going to do damage, at least one of those in the list, especially if you're taking the Gore Tide.
I absolutely wouldn't go for big units of Blood Reavers anymore.
Why is
Yeah,
that? Why would you say that, Pat?
Basically, there's so much mega damage around. I used to love running blocks of 40, but now that they're wholly within, they're impossible to keep within buff range. And some Terrorgeist or whatever is just going to come along and do 40 wounds to them and take them off for nothing. I mean, I think that'll be for all of AOS, but definitely for Khorne, MSU all the way. Because in practice, especially with the limited buff range, you're never going to get more than 1032s into combat anyway.
Matt, anything you want to say to that one?
But you just can't do the sweeping battle wide, pull in 30 units anymore.
Yeah, I'd agree with the Blood Reavers. I think there's definitely legs on units of anywhere between 10 to potentially even 20 Blood Warriors if you're okay with the fact you've got to deploy them to be within range of that whip, because that's going to be key. If you can sort of stick your whippy guy in the middle of a blob of the Blood Warriors, send them off at your opponent first turn, go into their ranks, hold up their battle line, because of course you're going to have hit them with bronze flesh, so they're going to be on a 3-up. They're hopefully going to be getting the feel no pain from the War Shrine, so they're going to be tough to move. They're going to be bouncing mortals back to you.
That's exactly what I did the other day. Worked a charm.
Perfect. And you can get them really easily down to 2s to hit, re-rolling to wound.
Yep.
So you're going to be kicking out a lot of damage, especially if it's going into like the chaff in the front of your opponent's army, because they're not going to have a great armor save, and Blood Warriors don't have rend, really. So they're a great option for doing something like that. And suddenly you've got battle line that's actually contributing. I would say battle line should always contribute to you. From a demon perspective, because our heroes are doing a lot of the damage, your battle line still has to do something, but it's perfectly acceptable for the thing they do to be just your chaff screens and your objective scorers, because someone's still got to do that while you're running around with your tyrants of blood and your cannons are thundering off with their wrathmonger bodies. You've still got to have those flesh hounds and bloodletters standing around on the objectives, because that's what's going to win you the battle.
Yeah.
No, great points. And I think it's been fascinating because in some army discussions, we talk only very little about battle line, but it kind of shows you how synergized the Blades of Khorne armies are with their battle line, and how important, Pat said earlier, the importance of having lots of small heroes. You can start to see how a lot of these small heroes start to really synergize and make the most of your battle line. So I think it's kind of now starting to come together, and then you add that formation, and all of a sudden we've got this solid soup of killing power. Speaking of killing power, we've got a whole bunch of non-battle line choices. You've got your Korgoraths or Corgis, you've got your Skull Reapers, you've got your Wrathmongers, and then you've got your Skull Cannons, which is, our one and only artillery choice. What do we like in that list? Is there something that suits in some situations? What do you guys go with?
Pretty much all of it.
Yep.
I like the sounds of. They're all good options.
Are they in your lists? When you're building lists, are all of those choices there, or what are your trade-offs?
My Azir is a mess. I've got a list for everything.
I find you can't get Wrathmongers and Skull Reapers into the same list in any numbers.
Why?
Just the points don't work out for it. There's a Wrathmonger battalion, a Skull Reaper battalion, but you can get Wrathmongers and 5 Skull Reapers, or Skull Reapers and 5 Wrathmongers, but you can't do both. That's just the way my list building has worked out, but I go with 6 heroes in battle line.
Right.
Wrathmongers aren't Wrathmongers anymore. As in, it's very sad what happened to them, but once you get past the grief and stop thinking of them as Wrathmongers and think of them as killy buff pieces, they're actually really awesome.
So what were they and what are they now for someone who maybe hasn't played with them just yet?
Okay, so your classic Wrathmonger was you kill a Wrathmonger, it possesses the model that killed it and attacks itself. So if you walk up and whack a Wrathmonger with a Terrorgeist, the Terrorgeist turns around and attacks itself and kills itself.
That was the old Wrathmonger? So what's the new one?
The new Wrathmonger it's pretty killy, and it's got an 8-inch radius buff thingo for an extra +1 attack that works on anything. At the moment, it also works on missile weapons. So we're waiting on the FAQ.
I did see someone in the chat say that on Twitch they believe that it's going to do both and it won't be FAQ'd. But I think for someone who's watching in the future and an FAQ drops, this may change. But at this particular point in time, it's going to buff melee and shooting.
I think the Wrathmonger is going to become a mainstay of Khorne armies.
Mm-hmm.
Just because +1 to attack, and for Mortal Khorne, the best thing you can do is just get into one great big melee with all your units, because it's awesome fun and they just feed off each other. So I don't really write a list without at least one unit of Wrathmongers in it somewhere.
I'd agree. Wrathmongers are fantastic, especially if you're taking the heroes to complement them. So if you're chucking in
the Wrathmonger battalion with the double pile-in, it's awesome.
Yeah, that's huge. And you also take, I believe, Scar Bloodwrath.
Oh, yeah.
Because his command ability is going to allow them to pilot an attack when they die in the same manner of Blood Warriors. So you can go in with your Wrathmongers into something hard as nails. You're going to get a pilot and attack twice. You are then going to get attacked back into. You're going to do mortal wounds to that thing, potentially when it attacks you. And when you die, you're going to pilot an attack again. You are doing some serious damage with these guys. So I would say units of 5 are great for the buffing. Units of 10, because of the reach that they have on their chains, I believe they're 2 or 3 inches, they are viable. Because you can attack in 2 ranks with them. So it's easier to keep them compact and get them wholly within.
And if you're running them in a Mortal Khorne army, you should have an Asperger's Deathbringer and a banner, get them up to 6 attacks apiece, and they'll turn and burn. They're not what they were. And coming from an old Wrathmonger guy, there's always going to be that little moment of sadness when something attacks you and you think, I could have just killed that.
And for the people outside of Bendigo, that was an aspiring Deathbringer, I think Pat was talking about.
Yes.
Not what Pat actually said.
Oh, sorry.
Which we're not getting into repeat. We're not getting into repeat, but aspiring Deathbringer is the language.
Yeah, so actually, you got a lot better, oddly enough.
Yeah, so the Wrathmongers are different, but...
Yeah, they're completely different to what they were. Just don't think of them the same way.
No, and again, this is good for people who have played in the old edition and they're picking up their models for the first time, and they're going to notice that some things just aren't what they used to be. Like the Mighty Skull Crushers actually have got +1 on their save, so they're even better. They're a little bit more expensive, but they're better. For these guys, it sounds like the role and the abilities that you may leverage have significantly changed.
Oh, it used to be you could stick them out on their own. So they were one of the few Khorne units that could operate independently. And they can't now because they're not buffing anyone, so what's the point? But that's completely reversed for Skull Reapers. Skull Reapers are not what they were, but they are a really good buffed unit and they're a really good independent unit.
Yeah, they've gotten more vanilla. They lost a lot of their old rules, which were super cool. I won't go into their old rules because we probably got to go to bed in a couple hours' time, and that War Scroll was an absolute mess with the amount of rules it had on it. It was great fun, but it wasn't easy to play against, certainly if it was the first time, because they had like 5 special rules for that unit.
Old Skull Reapers.
Now they're probably just
as good. Why?
Yeah, they got rid of the 2-handers, which suck. but everyone got the extra attack. Everyone's hitting on 3s now, and everyone's doing the mortal wounds. So they combine the best of both worlds for the old weapons. So they probably aren't better on balance. They're just...
You can't buff them up to do 40 mortal wounds plus their regular damage or whatever. They were insane with their full complement of buffs.
They will shred hordes. Absolutely destroy hordes, because they're also re-rolling to hit against a big unit. I think it's 5 or more models.
Yep.
They re-roll all hits. I know we've said you can chuck them off on their own, but obviously, like all Khorne, especially the Bloodbound, they're better at their buff. So if you can find a way to give them extra attacks and re-roll to wounds, suddenly they're 3s by 3s, re-rolling everything, doing extra attacks.
Yeah.
Doing mortal wounds on 6s to hit. They're really damaging. I think, like Pat says, all of the mortal list I've built, I've wanted to include a lot of, Knights and Skull Reapers and Wrathmongers and all of these different cool units. But once I've got the battle line, my heroes, and the War Shrine, I'm probably picking 2 out of about 4 really elite units.
So in a traditional 2,000 point army, you're probably getting up to about the 1,400, 1,500 point range, because you've just really, I don't want to say maxed out, but you've certainly invested a lot of your points in heroes, battalions, and your battle line choices. Is that fair?
Yep.
Yeah, which it's important to remember, like Pat says, with our mortals, we've made our battle line count. So it's not like you're going, these 2 units have to fight your entire enemy army, because hopefully they're backed up by things like useful units of Blood Warriors and Blood Reavers who are making 4 attacks each and stuff like that. So they don't have to do it all on their own, but these are the key pieces I'm looking to crack that really hard nut in the enemy army. Your units of 10 Wrathmongers, units of 10 Skull Reapers, unit of 6 Skull Crushers, stuff like that.
All the Khorne elite stuff, mortal, has its own battalion, and they're all good. So the Skull Reaper battalion ignores Neg 1 Ren. The Wrathmonger battalion is a double pilot as long as the Skull Grinder's alive, so you can really build an army around them.
Yeah,
and they've all got battle line choices built into them.
You're really starting to see this come together, and it sounds like, while there's some really exciting non-battle line choices, you're probably not going to have the points to really capitalize or take as much as you probably want.
No. And you don't want people charging into them anyway. They're worth a lot of points. So you're better off just having them hide behind, particularly Wrathmongers. They've got a 2-inch range.
But hey, I mean, that's why the Age of Sigmar gods made 2,500 point events, right?
Yep.
And there might be one coming up soon in Sydney.
What?
Anyway,
Winky Dink. Oh my god!
Oh my god!
I could run tyrants and loads of fleshhounds and cannons, for example.
Stay tuned. Announcements coming soon.
He's awesome.
Moving along, skull cannons. What do we think about skull cannons? Our one and only shooty unit.
I'm torn.
You're torn?
I want to see Khorne do well, but it will break my heart if I go to CanCon next year and see 10 Khorne lists with 9 skull cannons and 10 Wrathmongers and just enough battle line to sit in front of them.
You do not take 9 skull cannons. This is the thing. In a skull cannon list, assuming that Wrathmonger thing stays the same, and I'm going to work under the influence that it is, I'm going to compromise with my Clanfield associate, Chris Welfare. I'm not going to make my list all about them, but I'm going to include 3. I'm going to stick them near a unit of Wrathmongers. I'm going to make sure they've got the Locus activated. I'm going to be moving them forward. They're going to make 2 shooting attacks each in the shooting phase because of the Wrathmongers. They're going to be down to 2s rerolling 1s because of the Locus and the +1 to hit Killing Frenzy Prayer. And then they're going to be wounding on 3s with Rend and doing D6 damage. So they are in my Demons list, not because I think they're ridiculous and game-breaking, but because we've lost the movement. You need to be able to affect your opponent in that first turn. That is crucial. If your opponent's got that one model that's going to cause you real issues, you've got to be able to hurt it. And the reason I can marry up having shooting in my list is because this is shooting that wants to be in close combat. Because when these skull cannons do wounds to enemy units in close combat, they get to shoot additional shots with the cannon. It will have to be into the unit they're fighting unless they've wiped it out. But Khorne cares not from whence it flows.
How does that work for a unit of 3 skull cannons?
Sorry?
How does that work if you take 3 skull cannons in a unit?
Very well.
Because do they all have to do a wound, or?
So you can roll their attacks out separately. Yeah, they all have to do a wound, but there's nothing that... If I have a unit of 60 grots, I can roll their attacks out separately. I just have to declare where they go first.
Okay, so this one.
So yeah, it's going to be annoying, but they're not a unit that has loads of dice to roll, so you should be able to smash through their attacks.
Have 3 sets of different colored dice for the roll. Just do us all a favor and roll them at once.
Again, that's a good shout.
That's why I'm the coach. But I love this. I love Khorne. You guys are G'ing me up for a Khorne army. Anything else we want to talk about non-battleline, or I want to talk actually before I move on to allies. There's a hero that we didn't get to talk to, and I want your opinions for the Slayer of Kings himself. How does the mighty Archaon fit in a Khorne army? Is he a good choice, or is he
of my apocalypse?
Rend 1, baby.
Why? So for the people who are thinking about him, like why are you not taking the Slayer of Kings in Khorne?
Archaon the mighty Lord of Khorne on the Juggernaut used to give +1 to wound, and that was the only reason to take Archaon, so you could potentially Slayer of Kings things off. But there's no +1 to wound buff anymore, so.
Yeah, I mean, it also means that you have to take a Nurgle and Tzeentch model in your list because of the ugly heads on there. So that's another negative strike against him.
Especially the Tzeentch model, like you'll get smited.
Honestly, I think there's a lot to be said for taking some spare Bloodthirster heads you have there, green stuffing on some necks, and giving him a dragon with 3 Bloodthirster heads. That's pretty cool, and I've seen that conversion done. I'd include that model in my army. I'm not sure I'd include his rule set in my army.
Yeah,
that's the thing.
Isn't that great? With the old +1 to wound, he was okay. And if you could stack bronze fleshes on him or whatever, but yeah, no.
Sounds like Archaon is probably not the best utilization of your points, unless he's your favorite model, and of course you run him every time you can.
I mean, Slayer of Kings is just a poor man's reality splitting axe on the mighty Lord.
Oh, we didn't even touch on the mighty Lord.
And Khorne's cool.
Oh, he's so good now.
Oh, he's good.
Do you guys want to quickly rewind and pretend that we talked about them in the leader section?
Oh, we didn't even get into basically.
All right, elevator pitch, high level. Matt, tell me about the mighty Lord of Khorne, and Pat, then you tell us about Khorne's call. So Matt.
So mighty Lord of Khorne. So reality splitting axe is something he has. Pat, do you want to talk about Khorne's call first? I'll bring up the war scroll I need because I don't take that many mortals.
So Cull he's a special character. He's the head of the Gore Tide, which is the toughest bloodbound faction. And that's the one you get in the starter box with the guy with the dog. Cull himself is an absolute bargain for 40 extra points. His command ability is typoed at the moment because it gives you re-rolls of 1 to hit in the charge phase.
Oh, yeah, so, awesome.
Yeah. Hopefully they'll fix that in the FAQ, but for
and just to clarify, you don't get to strike first. So obviously, I play Fanatics in my Gloomspite, and they get to attack in the charge phase, or they're out of sequence. You guys don't have anything like that, and this is just a brilliant error.
It's like you can re-roll hit to 1 in the charge phase. Huh?
So we do have things like that, and we'll get to that. It's demons who have things like that, but not in this case. In this case, it is a typo.
Yeah.
With the 8-inch pile-in. So the reality splitting axe works. He's got the same one as the Mighty Lord. If you do any damage to a model at the end of the combat, If it's still alive, you roll the dice on a 5 up, off it goes. It's
Pretty
just
cool.
it's awesome fun when you can hit it. It's not super reliable, but it is terrifying for opponents with big monsters. It carries a weight of fear above and beyond what it actually does in practice. We have the general showdowns for Measured Gaming to resolve tiebreakers for our home tournaments, and in one famous occasion, I mighty lorded off Lord Salasad on a Dracoff and a Lord Salasad on a Sardrake.
On a 5+.
Yep.
Oh, best value for money right there.
Yeah, just bibbity bop, gone. So
Yeah,
called a Cull. You also get to dispel. Cull's got an 8-inch pile-in.
That's the best bit. Akshi's Bane. That's why you take him and not the normal Mighty Lord of Khorne.
For an
If
extra
you can
40 points.
make him run 6, pile in 8, 14 inches, plus his movement of 5, so you make him just go 19 inches. Just a dude on foot with a reality splitting axe.
Yep, you can whip him if you want for extra fun.
Yes.
He rerolls all hits, which is even better because you only really need to get. So you take him in a Gore-Tide battalion, and you only really need to touch a monster once. So it's one of the few occasions where it's actually good to split your attacks.
Mm.
If you bump into 2 Terrorgeists or whatever, he's going to die, but you may as well attack them both. Hope to get that one wound off, and then just vanish him. And he's also hilarious if your opponent has a Marathi.
Yes.
Because you just watch him sweat bullets and try to avoid him.
Amazing. That's cool. That's really cool.
They took a lot of fun stuff out for the next Khorne. I mean, a lot of the really fun stuff. Like the old item that used to double your attacks but turned you into a spawn if you didn't kill a model. But the reality splitting axe stayed, and I cannot recommend it enough. I won't put it in every list, but yeah, you should definitely try it just for that one time you get hold of buddy Alariel or something like that.
The joy on your face, Pat, that's one, a meme. I think someone needs to generate a meme for that. But 2, I think it kind of shows you how awesome the reality splitting axe is. And the not only the psychological fear of killing Nagash on a 5+ or a 1 in 3, but like just the psychological damage alone is like, oh, I don't want to be in that position from this random dude that piles in 8.
It was so good. Doppelganger cloak on the normal model.
Matt, you can tell us about Mighty Lord of Khorne?
One game once.
Leave him. Just, the one reason you take him is because his command ability is better than Khorne's Calls. But for pretty much every other reason, unless you just can't afford that 40 points, I would be taking Khorne's Call. The command ability is the command ability allows you to re-roll charge rolls, so it is useful. You can use this command ability at the start of your charge phase. If you do so, pick a friendly model with this command ability, ergo the guy you're talking about. Until the end of that phase, you can re-roll charge rolls for friendly Khorne mortal units within 16 of that model when the charge roll is made. Super good, like that command ability, but for me, you're missing out on Akshi's Bane, you're missing out on the re-rolls to hit, you're missing out on some really cool fluff, because Khorne's Cool is awesome. But yeah, I would take Cool if I could afford it.
Yeah, he's a lot to stick in for a mortal hero. And that's a Slaughter Priest and a Bloodstoker right there. But yeah, definitely worth a shout.
Awesome.
And also Exalted Deathbringers. You go on for hours.
Yeah.
If you're running mortal, take an Aspiring Deathbringer.
Yeah, you guys have so many leader choices. It's not funny, and this show could be 5 hours probably alone talking about leaders. But I want to talk about allies. I think we've talked about Battleline enough, and we've talked non-Battleline, and we've kind of acknowledged everyone. And again, depending on if you're a mortal or a demon or the type of formation that you want to run, but you guys have a pretty good spread when it comes to allies. You've got Beasts of Chaos, you've got Everchosen, we've got Monsters of Chaos, we've got Nurgle, we've got Slaves to Darkness. It says Slaanesh units cannot be taken as allies for Khorne. Interesting. They specifically call that out.
Because you can't take Slaves to Darkness with a Slaanesh keyword.
Because normally in a sorry, go on, Matt.
They're diametrically opposed. They're the ones who hate each other. So between the Chaos Gods, they all don't get on great. But Khorne and Slaanesh are diametrically opposed because Khorne finds Slaanesh cowardly and sinful, over luxurious. Slaanesh finds Khorne barbaric. Nurgle and Tzeentch hate each other because they're stasis and change. So Slaanesh is the one we really want to avoid. We don't like Tzeentch because he's a wizard. Nurgle, we still don't love him, but sometimes Khorne can get on with Nurgle.
There you go. There's some narrative right there, guys. So this is why you can't take Slaanesh as an ally.
Skull Throne. Allies, I used to ally a Jabbersight in back when they were good. But that's just out of sheer assholishness.
Yeah, Jabbersights were broken goodness, and they have been updated.
I know. I haven't touched him since. Didn't even rebase him. Unless you're talking about the Rasta Spoilers Battalion, I just tend to stay away from allies. If it doesn't have the Khorne keyword, you'll regret it at some point.
Matt, you talked about Chaos Knights before. Does that count as an ally from Slaves to Darkness, or is that does that become a unit with a mark?
It shouldn't, because you can give them the mark of Khorne. And because all of our synergies work off that, you're going to give them the mark of Khorne.
Anything that can take the Khorne keyword can go straight into the army.
So it doesn't count as an ally?
No.
So that
counts. That counts as with your Beasts of Chaos in that formation too. So they adopt the Khorne keyword, and they don't count as allies. The one ally, if you wanted to be a horrible power gamer, and I wouldn't recommend it because your dice will stab you in the back for this. I've seen it happen. Is inside Beasts of Chaos, you could take a shaman, and that won't. You don't use them for the magic, but you use them for the movement buff, and it will give you Bestigors, Gors, Ungors, and Centaurs. So you would take your formation with the Khorne keyword all inside it, and then you would take an allied shaman just to make them go faster. Don't do it though, because even if you don't cast spells, you've still got a wizard in your list, and Khorne will see.
Yeah.
This is true. This is true.
Also worth mentioning the demons that can take a mark, which is Furies. They're okay.
Mm-hmm.
And Soul Grinder, I reckon, has got a lot of play with the Wrathmongers.
Yeah. Disappointing for the Soul Grinder is he really struggles from not having the run and charge anymore. I was notorious for a while for my love of Soul Grinders, and I still love them. But the great thing about them is they can run and shoot. And back in the day, you used to be able to run, shoot, and charge with them, and whip them. And they'd just be ridiculously quick, ridiculously tough. The issue is now that although they're still quick with movement 12, you're now comparing them directly to things like Bloodthirsters, and they lack the hero keyword. So because Duality of Death doesn't get a lot of play anymore, you're losing out on objective play there. It's still worth looking at because it's still got 2 good shooting attacks which will get affected by those Wrathmongers, but it's no longer the alpha strike that it used to be.
But with anything getting extra 2 attacks, it's piston 6 mortal wounds, you know.
Yeah, so the one really hard thing with him is the base is massive. And because he moves so much faster than the Wrathmongers, it's really hard after the first turn to keep those Wrathmongers in a position where they're going to be giving him extra attacks.
True.
So I guess the point I want to reinforce here is, one, you've got really good choice of allies, but you have unit choices that sit outside of your book that don't count as allies with the ability to put down the mark of Khorne.
Yes.
That's correct?
Oh, there's so many lists you could build with Slaves to Darkness and whatnot.
But if I'm picking up this book for the first time, I may not know that is an option to me.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So anything that can take a Khorne keyword, Slaves to Darkness, Beasts of Chaos can go in. And in my experience, if it doesn't have the Khorne keyword, at some point you'll regret it. because that'll be the unit you need to make it out of turn charge or something like that to spend blood Tithe on.
Yeah.
And you find that on the war scroll. It'll say on the war scroll, this unit can take a mark, and it might have all of the gods, or it might just...
Yep.
You'll find it on the war scroll. The best place to do the list building for it is, I forget whether it's a Zia or war scroll builder, but they will now say, even for the Beasts of Chaos, Khorne, when in this formation, inside the Braster spoilers, battle line when in Braster spoilers, that stuff. I believe it's a Zia, but I'll double check for you.
Nah, it's on War Scroll Builder as well.
War Scroll Builder. Okay, cool. Yeah, so it's not in a Zia. So if you're looking at those units, go War Scroll Builder.
Yeah, there's a vast amount of unit choices. Let me just bring it up. It's a ridiculous number.
So you got your Chaos Warriors, you'll have your Chaos Knights, you're going to have
37 leader choices, 29 unit choices, 5 behemoths, and 20 battalions.
There you go. You guys just got like 3 books out of 1, just purely from having different options.
Yeah, there's just so much you can do. If you're a list builder, Khorne is a dream army.
Because all of those units, I've yet to find one where I would just discount them and say you'd never take that in a list. I can't think of one, to be honest.
Chariots. Chariots are useless.
Chariots, good roadblocks. If you stick them in between a terrain piece and you go, you can't move 3 inches either side of that, you're talking about 10 inches between 2 terrain pieces where something can't move. Also, pretty cheap blood tithe. So they may not be optimal, but there's a use for everything.
Gee, Tascores are cheap blood tithe too.
All right, you guys aren't helping. You guys aren't helping list design. This poor kid who's walked into Games Workshop is like, "Oh, I want to start a Khorne army," and you guys just completely messed them up because you're just like, everything's great, everything works well. So,
what are you talking about? We've narrowed their whole GW's whole range. There is only about
just don't take Archaon.
Units worth taking.
And a whip guy. Start.
All right, let's talk Battleline. Not Battleline, Battalions. We talked enough about Battleline. Far out.
I was going to say,
I talked enough. Battalions, again, you guys have so many options, probably a good at least 20 options there. Which ones stand out for you? And like, what's your top 5 or your top 3 and why?
Let's go. So maybe 5 could take some time.
All right, let's do top 3. Start with Matt, then Pat. Then we'll rotate. So, Matt, what's your first one?
Top 1 for me is Tyrants of Blood. So you take 3 to 8 Bloodthirsters. You stick them all in this battalion, any number of any combination of that Exalted we talked about before, who is a Beatstick, a Scarbrand, and then any of the 3 I actually talked about in depth. Stick them in there. Essentially, what the formation will give you is that it will allow them all to attack in a row. So I attack with 1 Bloodthirster, and then immediately I attack with the 2nd, immediately I attack with the 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th, all before you get to activate your first unit. So that is what the battalion does, and you can also link it in to the slaughter hosts for them. I believe I keep getting the names of them mixed up, so I'll bring them up just to double check.
Bloodlords.
Yeah, Bloodlords and Reapers of Vengeance are the one. There's one which the artifact allows you to always attack first on whoever's holding it. So even in your opponent's turn, if they attack my Bloodthirster who's got that, I will go first, and then all of my other Bloodthirsters in the formation will go before they get to activate. So it's like the ultimate fanatic there. So that was the Bloodlords. And then the Reapers of Vengeance, which is arguably better. I'd be sticking an Aether Quartz brooch in the list just to keep a lot of command points available, because command ability, you can use this command ability at the start of the combat phase if you do pick one Reapers of Vengeance demon unit, this is going to have to be FAQ because it's a bit sus, the wording with the actual formation. So hopefully we'll have a better idea later in the week. But after this unit has fought in the combat phase for the first time, if it is within 3 of an enemy unit, it can immediately make a pile-in move and then attack with all of its melee weapons it's armed with for a second time. Mm-hmm. So you're talking about even in 3 Bloodthirsters inside that formation, which is what you'll see most of the time at 2K, just taking the minimum, you could have 6 Bloodthirster activations before your opponent gets to activate. So that is potentially crippling.
And people are scared about Terrorgeist double piling in right now. That
don't get me wrong, Gristlegore is still better, but that is good.
All right, so that's Matt number 1. Pat, what is your one of your favorite?
They're all okay. The mortal ones. Classic Gore Pilgrims is good because it gives you all your battle line, and it's got a lot of drops in it. So you really want low drops for your Hexgorger skulls. It's a bit boring. It does buff the range of your Bloodsecrator banner to 24 inches. My current pick, what I'll be running on the weekend and probably the Border Wars, is a Dark Feast and the Bloodforge Battalion. Dark Feast is a Slaughter Priest, a Bloodstoker, and up to 6 units of Blood Reavers. And they get +1 extra attack if they're within 16 inches of the priest, which is nice. But what it really is a lot of units at low drops. I don't love battalions that stop working when you kill the one guy in them. Mm-hmm. And Blood Forged is 2 to 4 units of Wrathmongers, a unit of Blood Warriors, a Skull Grinder. And if the Wrathmongers are within 8 inches of the Skull Grinder, they can double pile in. And that's just a no-brainer if you want to run Wrathmongers. And it's 120 points.
That's good value. Get an artifact.
Low drops. The other one I'd be thinking of is the Slaughterborn, and that's an elite battalion, and that's Skull Grinders and Blood Warriors, and they all ignore 1 point of rend.
By the way, you kind of cheated. I said 1, 1, 1, 1. You're like 1, 3.
I'll hit you with 2 very quickly then.
Pat cares.
You were doing 3. No,
Pat cares not where the battalions are dropped. Matt, so what are the other 2?
I sort of quickly went over Murder Host and the Blood Hunt when I was talking at the start. They're both decent options. They'll get you Flesh Hounds, Bloodletters, basically your battle line on the field. They're all decent, so I'll count those as one that I've already talked about. The one that I want to just briefly touch on before we move on is actually a Mortals one. That's right, Pat. I'm coming for you.
Yep.
The Blood Mad Warband, which is one that's going to take up, it's a big formation. So it's going to take up a lot of your choices. It's going to be quite prescriptive, but it's stuff we want to be taking anyway. So I'm all right with it. You have to take 1 Aspiring Deathbringer, which will give you that +1 attack for a command point that we were talking about earlier. A Bloodsecrator, who's already in the list. We know this. 3 units of Blood Warriors. Now, 3 units is a lot, but Blood Warriors are great, so it doesn't feel like attacks. And already that's your battle line sorted. 1 to 2 unit of Blood Reavers. I'd stick to 1. I probably wouldn't take more than a 20. They could be a chaff wall, maybe. They could be a 10 and just be left on an objective. I don't know. 1 unit of Skull Reapers, and that's your formation. Basically, you add 1 to the attack characteristics of melee weapons used by this unit from the battalion if that unit made a charge move in the same turn.
Yeah, that's a good one.
So it's nice and simple, not too complicated, but +1 attack is great. Suddenly you don't have to worry about having to try too hard to get them within range of Wrathmongers and stuff like this. Just using the Aspiring Deathbringer and the Bloodsecrator, who we both know already have ways to give +1 attack to a unit, suddenly it's super easy to give a unit of Charging Skull Reapers 3 extra attacks each. Or get those Blood Warriors to making 5 attacks each.
4 attacks. Yeah, I'd just have to go for the maximum 4 attacks on my Skull Reapers with the Wrathmongers, just for that.
Great. It's a unit. It's one that I think is going to be really popular. It means that you'll see. It'll be a lot like Gore Pilgrims when people take it, because it is quite prescriptive on what you're taking. I think it'll end up being around maybe 1,000 points, just over, and then you'll see variety in those armies with what they spend the other 800 to 900 points on.
Just on Gore Pilgrim. Sorry, are you finished with that one? Or sorry.
Yeah, so I wouldn't take Gore Pilgrims with it, because you've already got your Bloodsecrator, you've already got your battle line in it. So leave Gore Pilgrims if you're taking this one.
For anyone that was playing Gore Pilgrims in the last book, has much changed between editions other than obviously the difference with the Bloodsecrator's banner, like or the rules very close to, or if not the same?
It's the same unit requirements. The best thing about Gore Pilgrims was it gave you reroll prayers for your Slaughter Priests, and you get that automatically for being around your shrine. So
okay, so maybe for someone who
Gore Pilgrims more in demon armies, weirdly enough, because that's your Bloodsecrator and your Slaughter Priests right there.
Yeah, there's definitely a list in there where you take Tyrants and Gore Pilgrims, if you wanted to, because it helps keep those Bloodthirsters within 24 instead of 16 of your banner. It's all right, but one of the best things about this book is it's no longer an auto take. So whereas we could have knocked over this show in an hour in the last edition,
half an hour, it's like Gore Pilgrims, take 2 Slaughter Priests, and blah blah blah. The end.
What to put in your Gore Pilgrims?
But
look, smart ass,
but look for anyone that was running Gore Pilgrims, there's still an optimal build. However, know that you've got your terrain piece, which is going to give you some of those benefits as well. So, but again, like you guys have so many battalion choices that again, the world is your oyster.
The best thing with Gore Pilgrims is you'll still use those units. So even if you've got those models, you don't want to run Gore Pilgrims. Basically, the formation I just read out, stick a couple Slaughter Priests on that, and you're halfway to fulfilling that one, and that's great.
Big tick for me.
I don't think this edition is going to produce a killer net list, so there won't be a murder host or anything like there used to be. Maybe skull cannons.
Yeah, no. Look, and when I think of the world that was Khorne, when the very first book dropped, when I was playing GBH 16, it was all about the murder host and blood letters to the face, like 90 blood letters to the face, turn 1. GBH, it's kind of evolved over time. But you're right. I feel like there are lots of different builds, and there's not going to be one net list that comes out that everyone runs.
I hope not. And if there is, it'll be skull cannons.
I don't think you'll see that too much. I think you'll see units of them. I think if you build your list around them, they'll die in combat. I think skull cannons are a great option for us. They give us something that we previously haven't had. They help because in this book we've become a much more all-rounder army. And so the skull cannons definitely help that, in that they give us tools to become an all-rounder army. But I think if you build Khorne to become a shooting list, you are polishing a turd and should probably just go buy a Clan Scryer army.
You break out the turd polish.
Like, it's a very nice turd, and it's useful. And flinging turds in a fight is never a bad strategy. But it's
a shiny lump of shit.
I wouldn't build a list around it. I would make it part of my list.
Really good points. Really good points. And again, there's so many battalions to choose from that we could be here for days. I want to talk customization now. We've talked list building. We've got a really good list around hero choices, and we've got battle line, and we've got some battalions, and we've kind of built it up with other specialist units. I want to start getting into the customization and making it unique and strong. And probably the first thing is, and I don't know the exact terminology, you know, Stormcasts have chambers, daughters have temples, Blades of Khorne, you guys have what?
Slaughter hosts.
Slaughter hosts. So we've got a slaughter host. You've got a couple of different options that will give you additional benefits, such as an ability, a command trait, an artifact. Which ones stand out to you and why?
The weird one about this is they're all good.
They're all good.
A lot of the other earlier AOS 2 books had some ones that were obvious choices, ones with one or two good things, and some that were absolute dogs you wouldn't touch in a blue fit.
So there's no Hagnar, auto-include Khorne.
No, they're all good.
Okay. And the one that you're enticed to the most?
I'll be running Gore Tide.
For me, it's the demons. I mean, I'll be sticking Tyrants of Blood inside Reapers of Vengeance to get the additional pile-ins on the Bloodthirsters. I'll be sticking Blood Hunt and some cannons inside Bloodlords because they reroll 1s to wound against heroes or monsters. So suddenly those cannons are going to be pretty easily down to 2s rerolling 1s to hit, 3s rerolling 1s to wound against heroes or monsters, and they're going to be doing damage. The Blood Hunt's going to give me my battle line. I'm going to have my Wrath of Khorne Thirster kitted out for combat and always striking first. And with +4 to move because of his command trait and rerolling all charges, it's just, they're great. All of the Slaughter hosts are great.
Yeah. I haven't even looked at the generic command abilities.
Yeah,
because you're going to take one of those.
One at a time. And the good thing is, if you do want to mix and match, so say you want to put a Wrath of Khorne Bloodthirster in your Gore Tide, you can give him the command trait and the artifact. So, you know, +1 to damage and an unrendable save. And stuff like that.
Yeah, so it's not. So you can definitely give him to mortal heroes. The issue is with the command abilities, they still have to go on to either demons or mortals. So you can definitely have like a mortal giving a buff to a demon unit, for example. No, sorry, you can't. Forget what I said there. It works for the command traits and the artifacts of power. It leave the extra abilities and command abilities alone.
You won't be able to use the others. It also means you can port in a Beast of Chaos hero and make him your general.
Absolutely. That is a good option too. It means that Braster spoilers list has some use out of the artifacts here, because we don't actually give artifacts to beasts, because all of the artifacts within the book are dedicated to either demons or bloodbound or mortals. But if you go and stick them into the Skullfiend tribe, for instance, if you wanted to, you could give them Crown Cleaver, which is an artifact of power where you pick one of the bearer's melee weapons, add 2 to the attack characteristics of that weapon, stick it on a Doom Ball, go to town, and then you've got your other Doom Ball who's going to get given, say, Gear Strike or something, because you can still give them the Malign Sorcery artifacts. And suddenly, even though you have 2 artifacts and the inherent book ones mean you can't give them to beasts, you still get mileage out of it.
Yeah, I've got my Doom Ball plan.
Yeah, it's a good option. Just quickly before we move on from the Skull Tribe, the Slaughter hosts, Nathan out of Clan Filth will, well, he won't kill me because he's too nice for that, but I feel like he would be sad if I didn't mention that Corgis in the Skullfiend tribe will ruin your effing day.
Ugh.
Corgis are great models to begin with, but the command ability, you can use this command ability at the start of the combat phase. If you do so, pick one friendly unit with this command ability until the end of the phase. You can reroll hit and wounds for attacks made by friendly Skull Fiend Tribe Khorne units wholly within 10. All hits, all wounds, and those corgis will become blenders in like units of 3.
My only beef with Khorne is they lost the Bloodstoker, which is just so non-narrative because they've actually got scars on their backs from their whipping.
That is a shame. I prefer to now think that they're doing it to themselves with their skull tentacles.
Nice.
That's like their way of hugging.
It's another narrative bomb you guys are dropping. I love this. This is the narrative show as well.
But yeah, they're definitely all usable. Again, it just supports what we were saying. Any unit is viable because not only will you probably be able to find synergies for them, there's a good chance you'll find a formation for them, and there's an even greater chance you'll find some use for the slaughter hosts for them.
Yep. Khorne 2.0 is a list builder's dream.
As I said, my Azir is a mess.
What else? Artifacts.
Yeah, you guys have touched on artifacts. Is there anything else that you would call out from an artifact point of view? So you guys have talked about loading up your Doom Bulls.
There's a few sneaky combos in there for mortal. The first thing I'll say about artifacts is every army I build is from the Realm of Light and carries an Ether Quartz brooch.
Why?
Narrative. That's why.
Narrative.
Pat has the shop and the only distribution network of that brooch.
Same place zombie dragons get their ethereal amulets from.
All right.
No, it's just the army is command point thirsty, and there's nothing in there to give you any of them back.
Well, there is. You've got the Blood Tithe, where you can spend 1 to get a command point. We'll quickly go back and talk about the Blood Tithe table, unless we did it before.
No, we haven't talked about it yet, but maybe we'll save it to like the tactical piece around Blood Tithe and how you guys think about using Blood Tithe. Is that all right?
Yeah, that sounds good to me.
Let's make sure we acknowledge that. Like, it's in the book.
One combo I will announce to the world, because I do keep things close to my chest. Mighty Lording is not a cooperative business. Is the Skull Helm of Khorne on an aspiring Deathbringer. So if you're within 3 inches of an aspiring Deathbringer and you fail a battle shock test, you lose an extra D3 models. And the Skull Helm of Khorne is a -2, -2 leadership bubble.
Oh, so it's D3 -2.
And there's a few other things in there that'll get you another D3, but that'll get you into a demon or an undead unit. And a lot of things are immune to battle shock, but at the very least, you'll force your opponent to spend a command point to save them.
You stay away from my Bravery for Grots.
And just for that one glorious day when you get stuck into a unit of eels, kill 2 of them, and the remainder just battle shock off with the extra D3. What else? The Bloodstoker banner. There's 3 of them. A lot of the older artifacts are garbage, and you wouldn't take them.
Banner of
Wrath. D3 mortals on a 4-up to every enemy unit within 8 inches in the combat phase.
Yeah, I was going to go over that one. That's super strong on a Bloodscrater. Because you can now run him up the guts of your enemy, and if anyone gets too close, zap them with that banner.
It used to be only in your hero phase, which generally meant he was dead.
Yeah.
But every combat phase, if you're in a big scrum, and that's where you want to be, that will churn out some mortals. What others? Yeah, there's some good ones in there.
I mean, obviously we can go through malign sorcery and the rule book, but it sounds like there's probably, I mean, you guys have enough benefits, and obviously thinking about the army builds you have, but there's nothing that really stands out as like this is the must pick item because it's so hot. And
the Brazen Rune, I took it in everything, and they've nerfed it, and it's really quite good because you get more choices. But the compulsory artifacts from the slaughter host are all good. And you should be running at least 1 battalion.
Awesome. Matt, anything else that stands out for me from an artifact point of view, or should we get into blessings?
With demons, I'll go over them really quick. There's 2 that stand out to me. The Crimson Crown, which used to allow you to do extra attacks. It's not anymore good because that was sort of messy towards the end. But as Pat said, we are a command ability hungry army. So sticking the Crimson Crown on your Unfettered Fury Bloodthirster is not a bad idea, because you want to be using his command ability a lot. Remember, that's the one where we talked about piling in 6 for all the demons around him. Once per battle round, the bearer can use the command ability on their war scroll without a command point being spent. So it just means that you get to do it all the time, probably in your turn. Although you can do it in your opponent's turn. Don't get too close to those Bloodthirsters when the Unfettered Fury's around, because even if you don't charge them, they'll still be able to pile in against you. But yeah, the Crimson Crown's a good option. The really, really strong option, if you're not already taking the Bloodlords, where you get the pile in first one, is Kartoth the Bloodhunger. At the start of the combat phase, roll a dice. On a 4-up, the bearer fights at the start of the combat phase before the players pick any other unit to fight in that combat phase. The bearer cannot fight again in that combat phase unless an ability or spell allows it to fight more than once. So you stick that in your Reapers of Vengeance army, where you also have your Tyrants of Blood, and suddenly you've got a 50% chance of, again, always getting to attack with all of your Bloodthirsters.
The best thing is, in order of activation, if you get hit with like an itching nuisance spell or something, will actually come after that, so you still get to attack first.
Why is that? Because it says at the start of the combat phase.
So anything that makes you attack at the end of the combat phase goes in order of activation. So a spell that makes you attack at the end of the combat phase will override like an Ideneth Deepkin ability, but it won't override something that comes later in. So if the Beast of Chaos Bull affected your last turn, it all goes off order of activation.
Okay.
Yeah.
Luckily, GW's put out an FAQ article about activation and fighting in phase. So
it came up with the Doom Bull, the bull thing from the Beast of Chaos and the Deepkin.
Yeah. But you guys
are last applied takes precedence.
Raise some good points.
Cool.
Any other artifacts or blessings?
Blessings. Ooh.
Pray to the mighty Lord of Khorne. Blessings. Is there something that
skulls? Hexforger skulls.
Hexforger skulls are great.
All right. So both of you are saying this prayer.
In every tournament army I run, without exception, they're an auto include. They're potentially devastating to a caster army by their very nature. The skulls are a bit flaky, in that there's a 50% chance they'll disappear at the end of your battle round, and if your opponent gets the next turn, he won't be affected by the skulls. So getting that first drop off, so getting a low drop army and having the first turn if you want to use the skulls is more important than ever.
Yeah.
But for what they do, they are just awesome. So you put them out there, anything within 12 inches gets a -2 to cast. Anything within 12 inches of both skulls gets the -2, and if they roll a natural 8 on their casting roll, they take D6 wound mortals. Every other wizard within 12 inches of the skulls takes D6 mortals, and they forget the spell they cast.
Nice.
So that's going to change Age of Sigmar more than people expect, because if you take Nagash to a tournament and someone drops that thing on you for one turn, and I get my 8 spells, it's a 13% chance of rolling an 8 or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So Nagash casts his spell, forgets it, and wipes out all his Necromancer minions. It would just be too good. And it's a -2 as well.
They are great. They also counter brilliantly with the amount of dispels we got in the army. So even if you can't get both of them in range of certain wizards, being at -2 to cast suddenly means that we're more likely to dispel unbind, especially if you're doing it with something like a Wrath of Khorne Thirster who's already so good at unbinding. It just means that your opponent's magic phase is going to become so difficult for them. Pat brought up Legions of Nagash. Obviously, they're great at casting spells because they have inherent pluses to cast. But if you're talking things like Nurgle, who need to cast stuff like Blades of Putrefaction on a 7, it's quite hard for them inherently to get pluses to cast. So that means that suddenly on a 7, where it's roughly 50-50 that you're going to get blades off, it's now on a 9.
And your opponent...
And I still get to attempt to unbind you. And if you're near my Bloodsecrator banner, you have to re-roll that successful 9. You're not getting blades off easily. And that can potentially completely stunt your opponent.
Yeah, there's so many armies that rely on...
Yep.
There's so many armies that rely on magic phase and getting those magic buffs off. Like even like having the re-roll from a is it the Bloodsecrator or what's the yeah, like even just making re-rolls without the minus alone can be tough. Then they add the negatives and then you've got the unbind on top of that. It's just nasty.
Completely.
And an extra -1 to cast within 16 inches of your shrine, which you can stick in the middle of the table. Doesn't have to go in your deployment zone, so you can really ruin a wizard's day. The best thing I will ever do with the skulls is come up against, you don't see them much anymore, unfortunately, but if you come up against a big bird of Zinch, the lowest dice roll automatically matches their highest dice roll.
Yep.
So if they roll a 4 and anything under a 4, within range of the skulls, kaboom.
Yeah, they're in big trouble.
And you just all their army of wizards, you will just blow them to hell. It's beautiful. And for 40 points, they're the most reliable ones to cast. 3 up with a reroll if you're within range of the thingo, auto include. And they can just be, I mean, you can deploy out of range of them, but then you've got to deploy out of range of them. But they can just be a nightmare for caster armies. They're not reliable. As in, half the time they'll disappear, and if your opponent gets a first turn, they won't do nothing. But, yeah, auto include.
Any other Matt God?
I would agree. If we're looking at other ones, I would probably leave the icon behind. I don't think it's worth it. I would use it as a really cool weapon. Take off an axe, stick it on the end of a Bloodthirster's axe handle, and it'll look sick. Put it on your war shrine, it'll look dope. It's a really cool model. I just think if you're comparing it to the Hexgorger Skulls and the Wrath Axe, which is the other one to look at, it's just not there.
Just to clarify, we've jumped from blessings to judgments. Just in case, again, someone new is trying to follow through. We've talked about some of the blessings that you've got for your slaughter priest. We're now talking about the 3 endless spells / judgments that are available.
Icon in combination. I was talking about the Aspiring Deathbringer earlier. The Bleeding Icon adds another D3 to Battle Shock. So if you hit them at the right time, and it's a bit more reliable to cast the Wrath Axe, I just don't think it's worth its points. It's a 5 up with a reroll.
Which will happen, I think, more than half the time. The thing with the Wrath Axe is it's so much damage.
Yeah.
It's essentially D6 damage to one thing that it travels over and D3 damage to everything else it goes over.
No, it doesn't have to travel over the D6 damage. It's just within 3 inches.
Oh, within 3 inches. And the reality cleaved is also great. So as an additional thing to all that damage that it's kicking out, subtract 1 to hit rolls for attacks made by units within 3 of this model. This ability has no effect on Khorne units. So if you're about to charge your opponent's big bad with your Blood Warriors, for instance, that we talked about caging your opponent in, if you can take first turn, stick that Wrath Axe up the field, suddenly they're even more survivable.
And
So
as a,
I would say,
I want to
sorry,
know,
go on.
as an opponent, so can I unbind this? Can I stop it somehow? Like, what can I do as an opponent? Because I guess it's like it's knowing my limitations. So as a Khorne player, can it be unbound? Can it be dispelled? How does this mechanic work for?
As an opponent, you can go on
Yeah,
and complain.
yep. So I go onto Twitter and hashtag somebody, but I can't dispel it. But I think you guys said earlier that.
You can't move them, but they basically automatically disappear at the end of the battle round.
Okay, so they're not a predatory spell. They're not a real spell, so I don't get a chance to unbind. But at the end of the battle round, they automatically just go away, or it's on a roll.
They remain, and that's a 4-up if they're within 8 inches of a priest or the shrine.
The
Okay.
main defense you can do against them, Coach, is knowing your threat ranges for them.
Yeah.
Because they're not particularly far that they're going to be able to go. So with the Wrath Axe, for instance, if I take the first turn, I can't realistically hurt you too bad with the Wrath Axe because we're going to be 18 inches away. So on a 5-up, it goes off. I set it wholly within 8. So let's say my priest is on my deployment line. You're 18 away. Suddenly it's 10 inches away from you. I can move it 8, so it's 2 inches away. After this model is moved, roll a dice for each unit it's passed across. It hasn't passed across any. On a 2 or more, that unit suffers D3. Pick one enemy unit within 3 of this model. Roll a dice. On a 2-up, that enemy takes D6 mortal wounds. So in that situation, if I've deployed on my front line, you've deployed on your front line, the chaff wall can take D6 mortal wounds. But if you deploy an inch back, suddenly you're Wrath Axe free.
So I wanted to play devil's advocate here. So when a Khorne player is thinking about these judgments, to know how to use them and what that limitation is. So good call out. Thank you very much.
So the other one to be aware of is the range on the skulls, and that's 28 inches. Again,
That's
8-inch cast, 8-inch movement, 12 inches effect radius. So if you deploy your casters back 28 inches in the first turn, you'll be fine.
No, good points.
Which, I don't mind if your casters are back that far.
And that's it. If someone knows what those what it does and they're concerned about it, you've just pushed those spell casters back so far away. But if not, then you're going to be in threat range quite early.
Mm-hmm. And they're also big bases, good for blocking stuff off too.
Yeah, that's true. You stick inside a gap, like I was talking about with that chariot before. You stick a couple Hex Gorger skulls in a gap between scenery, measure it out so that if your opponent's army's all on, say, 32s at a minimum, then they're not fitting in the inch gap you leave between the skulls and the 2 pieces of scenery. They can't move through there. Because they can't move over the bases, which are pretty big.
But yeah, I think the skulls are going to change the game.
Cool.
Yeah, I think they make Khorne the ultimate anti-magic army, which it probably should be.
Yep.
So, and it has probably been for a long time. At least in certain builds, it's made magic really hard to cast. But it sounds like even more so, you guys are going to really have the tools to.
Every Khorne model that gets a dispel can now dispel an endless spell as well.
Yeah.
Yes.
And you are starting to see armies that have 2, 3, 4, 5 endless spells. It's not becoming uncommon. So this is a great hard counter for those armies, especially Skaven have got some really strong endless spells right now. You guys have a really hard counter to that.
Yeah.
Anything else you guys want to talk about from a customization point of view, or can we get into some of the sexy stuff that is the tactical pieces? Let's talk blood tie. Let's talk about table positioning of your altar. Let's talk
blessings. So they're all pretty standard, +1 to hit, +1 to save. The sleeper in the blessings is, what's it called? The dispel one. Hang on, I'll bring it up.
I forget the name of it.
But this is the sleeper hit. It's the Spellbane Hex. So if the prayer is successful on a 4-up, generally with a reroll, you can dispel one endless spell within 16 inches of the model chanting this prayer. So that's a 75% chance of just straight up getting rid of your Skaven warp tower thingy or whatever. And you can do it later in the phase when you've already had a crack at dispelling them with whatever other dispels you have handy.
See you later, Flesh Eater Court's Chalice. See you later. All these great spells. You've just gone.
It's a straight 75% chance if you've got the reroll, and yeah, that's a sleeper hit.
I would have it on my third priest. If I was talking from a tournament standpoint, I would probably always value the +1 to hit, +1 to save more.
Off the rank, sure.
But if you're taking 2 priests and say Gore Pilgrims, and then you've got your War Shrine, then give one of them that, and that's a good option for them. The only other one that's worth looking at is your Blood Sacrifice, which you gain a Blood Tithe point for taking D3 mortal wounds onto a unit.
Perennial favourite.
Yeah. It's a decent way to get those Blood Tithe points going up a bit quicker. I tend to like doing my Blood Tithe the old-fashioned way and just killing units. But there are lists that build around it, and they're decent options if you want to build that way, but it's up to you, really.
Old summoning list multiple sacrifices, and that's not a thing anymore.
Yeah.
How do you guys like to spend your Blood Tithe?
Ooh.
Often.
Yeah, frequently.
Are you guys who like to save up for some of the bigger pieces? Is it something that you do lots of the little ones? Do you feel like talk to me about situations and how you think about your managing Blood Tithe?
Mentally speaking, I never save my Blood Tithe. As in, I'll let them rack up to 8 and get a Bloodthirster, but I'll never get into a mindset where I'm not going to spend it on something that's useful on the way to 8 points because I'm saving it for something later. Because as often as not, it's the 3-point move or charge Blood Tithe that'll win your battles.
That's the one.
Into combat or onto an objective or retreating out of combat. That's the one I probably use the most out of all of them. And that's just so useful. Your opponent's lining up for his big charge to crush your army, and you move him in his hero phase and just throw a unit right into his teeth. That's probably the tactic I use the most.
Yeah, I will rarely... I will quite rarely ever save up on purpose for something. It tends to be that I will look to spend it quite often on things like the Spell Eater Curse, which is an auto unbind. Summoning units like 5 dogs are great for summoning because you stick them 9 inches away from the enemy. But like we've said, on their War Scroll, they inherently get a reroll charges. So 9-inch charge with a reroll is fairly doable a lot of the time.
You can still take a summoning bot too.
Yeah, it's decent. Like Pat said, Murderlust is great. The movement or charge for just getting to where you need to be. There's a couple further up the list that are worth doing, but I wouldn't save for them in particular. I would more go, if we've got a particularly bloody turn that's just happened and 6, 7, 8 units have died, then that's a great bonus. But especially now that you can't save up your Blood Tithe to summon multiple demon units at once, I would say you're better off just using your Blood Tithe to affect the game. Use your Blood Tithe like your Murderlust to get into a position where you can kill a bunch of enemy units with one of your units, and suddenly you've got more Blood Tithe for next turn anyway.
Yeah.
You get killed, you get more Blood Tithe.
I think where I've seen Khorne players go bad is when they get kind of pigeonholed and just solely focus on trying to get that Bloodthirster out. But then on the flip side, the ones that I think have done really well is the ones who are looking for those cheeky late game summons, but they're also always assessing the situation and looking at the different phases and going, right, do I have a Blood Tithe that's going to help me in this particular dispel, charge, anything, and they're always constantly assessing the game as opposed to, again, that fixed mindset of got to get me a Bloodthirster, got to get me a Bloodthirster.
Oh, the Bloodthirster thing was all about the 8-point wherever you want in summon, which was awesome.
Yeah. But, you know,
Yeah.
bringing on other units is just as valuable, especially when you're looking for bodies. That's where I've seen good and bad Khorne players go.
If you're a new Khorne player, don't be afraid to stop your opponent at the start of his hero phase and take a minute or two to think about spending your blood tithe, because you spend them in your opponent's turn as much as anything. So you have a start of the hero phase and you can just stop him and think about it. You won't appreciate it much, but it's easier to do that than it is to try and backpedal after he's rolled a spell or used a command ability or something like that.
Well, it's all about how you chat to your opponent as much as anything. Let them know before the game, hey, I've got this ability. It's my allegiance ability. At the start of either turn, I'm just going to take a moment just to think about what I want to do. And 99 out of 100 opponents will be absolutely fine with that. Because you know what? As long as you're not spending more than, more than like 30 seconds to a minute on it, no one's going to care too much. They'll just treat it like the end of your turn, basically.
As you guys said, like the backtracking piece is where it kind of gets a bit frustrating. But if you said, yeah, absolutely, I've had Khorne players go, look, before you do anything, can I just quickly have a look and how many spells you're going to cast, and then they can assess if and when they use the blood type for unbinding or whatever it might be.
Yeah,
that's fine. Like,
sure they know.
You sit there for 5 minutes looking at a blood tithe table, different story. But
yeah. Don't be that guy. Don't slow play and ruin your opponent's enjoyment of the game. I tend to, if I'm getting to the end of my turn and I know my opponent is about to have their turn, I'll start thinking about it then. You should be already, because you should be planning for your opponent's next turn regardless. But I'll be thinking, where are my heroes? Where am I going to summon off if I am? What spells can they do? That way you don't need to slow your opponent down. But if it's a minute, I'd be very surprised if any opponent had a big problem with it.
Once you get into Khorne, you're always thinking of your blood tithe. But just for new players, they can forget to use it.
But if you're a brand new player as well, like, don't feel rushed. Like, if you're brand new, but one thing I'm really curious about is, as someone who's recently gained an allegiance terrain piece, positioning is critical to me, and thinking about where I position my piece. What are considerations you guys have when it comes to your altar? Is there an ideal spot? Is there things that you're thinking about that you're trying to set up?
Oh, ideally, you probably want it within 8 inches of the starting position of your priests, and towards the center of the battlefield where you want your priest to go if you're in a scenario where your army's moving forward. Because the further forward you get it, the more use you get out of the 16-inch casting bubble. But if you're just defending your knife to the heart, you'll probably want it close to your own lines. But there's also blocks line of sight and provides cover as well.
Yeah, think about where the objectives are going to be too. If you can get it close in like places of power, stick a banner on top of that thing, 2-up save. Great. And you'll be fighting around it. And the priests like being around the banner anyway a lot of the time. So that's a win-win-win. The only other thing to keep in mind is if you're at a tournament and part of that tournament is that you set up some terrain as part of it, just keep in mind you want to create gaps where that terrain piece can fit, because you need an inch gap between all the other terrain pieces and the skull altar.
Yeah, but if you can sort of pick somewhere where the fight's going to be, I'm sure there's tricks we haven't really hit on yet with the altar, but if you can pick where you think the fight's going to be, put it there, because that's where you want to be.
Yeah. And like, you can always think about, like, if you're playing against Nurgle, where they're going to put their feculent Narmor. Thinking about, I guess, thinking if I'm against a Sylvaneth player and there's a big area where woods can go, trying to deny a Sylvaneth player dropping their wild woods.
Thinking about if there's a key piece of arcane terrain, for instance, that you think your opponent's going to want to get on, stick it near that. Suddenly doesn't matter.
Yeah,
because they get the +1, you take 1 away for being within 16 of your skull altar. So it's these things you have to consider with it, but that will come with experience. We're all still playing around with it.
Also, remember, it's got a very long tail on it too. So you can tail it back a long way if you point the staircase towards your own lines.
Well, really good point. When I think about Khorne, it's probably 3 more questions I really want to ask you guys, unless there's something else you want to bring up. And this is probably really tapping into your experience of playing with Khorne for such long times. And if we start getting into a bit more advanced techniques, the first one I want to ask you is, how do you best play with Khorne on the table? What's the things that you consider and play with, and what makes you a good Khorne player?
Basically, I would say experience getting out playing with them, because the biggest part with this army, especially with the new book, is going to be keeping all of your buffing pieces wholly within each other, which is a big change we're going to have to do. Because in the old book, it was a bit more forgiving, but now you've got to be thinking even little things like piling in. Am I about to pile out of a buff that I'm going to need next turn? Am I about to, potentially stuff myself over? Am I going to stay wholly within that unfettered fury for the pile in 6 inches? That sort of thing. It's going to be experience, but it's also just reminding yourself as you go. It's that thing of almost writing down on a piece of paper what I need to do in my hero phase, what I need to do here, what I need to do here. Is just checking that everything's in the right place before you move on.
Yeah, you magic before you charge and stuff like that.
Yeah.
16 inches really isn't that far.
No. I think there's going to be a lot of case for burning a command point to make that Blood's Crater run 6. Because suddenly you go 11 up the board, and that's a lot easier to keep track of. But yeah, it's thinking about where your buffs need to be and where the units need to be to benefit from those buffs.
Yeah, it's practice. I don't know. I'm not sure what makes a good Khorne player. Just you got to love fighting, really.
Yeah.
And I think the best Khorne players aren't afraid to lose stuff.
Yep, I would agree with that. I think Khorne has to go in with a mindset of being okay to lose. The blood tie is a nice kind of little, like a mattress behind you that know that you're going to have stuff to do later. But you're right, like a conservative Khorne player, they're the ones who struggle the most. From my experience, anyway, as an opponent.
Yeah, don't be afraid to trade things. If my opponent's got a unit of, say my opponent's got a Terrorgeist, I'll trade it. I'll get into a position where I can activate first with my Bloodthirster, kill the Terrorgeist. It'll activate back because it's Gristlegore and kill my Bloodthirster. Fine, happy with the trade. Don't be afraid to do that, because then you're just inviting your opponent to take the initiative and just kill you. Remember, if you kill your opponent's unit and your unit dies as a result, that's 2 blood tithe, which is 5 bloodletters.
Yeah, that's really good advice. What advice would you give a new player starting with Khorne?
What models do you like? Literally, because the theme of this chat has been that there are so many options. You can pretty much always make it work. When you're new, your objective should never be, I want to crush everyone, I want to smash them out. You should take those baby steps, learn to understand what the army is, and then that'll come next. So pick models you like, because there will be a way to make them useful.
Yeah.
Even if they are chariots. Just don't take more than 2.
Yeah, Shrine, Judgment, Bloodsecrator, Bloodstoker. And yeah, just go in what direction you like from there. Don't take Bloodletters if you're not going to buff them up their attacks. They're garbage.
Yeah. And I think the theme of this chat today has really been about start at the top of the tree and really think about, am I immortal? Am I a demon? And start building within that model to get the best of my army. But again, pick what you love and And
Yeah,
and
if you love
and,
blood letters, learn to love something else.
and if you want to run 4 bloodthirsters, do it. Who cares? Have fun. It's your hobby. Go for it.
Join me.
I love it. I love seeing the big beasts, and to me, that's what makes Sigmar, having terrorgeists and zombie dragons and bloodthirsters and great unclean ones and just big monster mash.
Actually, just all you should do is work your entire army around trying to get 24 mortal wounds out of Scarbrand. Get him the bonus 3 attacks and let him rip.
Yes.
24 mortals just for showing up. You can't ask for a better deal than that.
All right. The last question I have before I get you guys to do some shout outs to your crews is based on all of your experience, all of the games, all of the wins, all of the losses. What is your top tip for Khorne?
Honestly, buff the living shit out of your attacks as much as you can. It's always good. It always works. That's for Mortal Khorne. Just plus 1, plus 2, plus 3 attacks. Plus 2 is the magic number. And get to plus 3 if you can.
I feel like there's a bumper sticker for your car. Buff the shit out of your attacks.
Yeah. That's the basic mathematics of Khorne. And whenever I think about what a Khorne model does, so I always just add on in my head plus Khorne. So Blood Warrior has 2 plus Khorne attacks.
Love it.
Scarbrand gets 2 plus Khorne, and if you're a demon, it's plus 2. If you're a mortal, it's up to plus 3. And just do that. And roll a fuckload of dice.
Matt, what's your top tip from all of your experience?
For pretty much every army I play in Khorne, it definitely is part of. Age of Sigmar is not a dice game, it's a movement game.
Yeah.
Control the board and you will control the game. So don't be afraid of taking MSUs, spread out, use the formations, keep the drops low, take first turn if you can affect your opponent. If it's not in your best case, then let him come to you. Basically, you just want dominance of the board, and then dominance of your opponent will come afterwards. So many times I've gone up early in a scenario, and your opponent makes decisions he doesn't want to make because he has to stay in that scenario. So he doesn't charge your unit in his turn because he has to go stand on an objective. Great, I'll charge you in my turn.
No, good advice. Good advice. Especially if you're taking battalions, there's a really good chance that you will dictate first turn unless you're against something like a Sylvaneth.
Yeah. Try and keep it under 6, especially if you're using the skulls.
Yeah. Is there anything else you guys want to add, or should we start kind of wrapping this up? We've gone for a while. Like we've gone for like solid at least 2 hours.
Hours.
Yeah.
There's not much more to talk about, but
I mean, there's a lot we could talk about here, but I think for me, like I've learned a lot, and I've played Matt many times. I've played other Khorne players many times. At Adepticon a few weeks ago, I played 30 Skull Crushers, so I got to play the Brass Stampede, and like I played Nathan with his Gore Pilgrim so often, Deke with his Khorne Dragon, sitting on mystical terrain, and like I've played Khorne a lot, but this new book has just added another dimension, and I'm looking forward to seeing the combinations.
2 war shrines and a Khorne dragon. That's the way of the future.
Good luck. He did have a war shrine. Deke did have a war shrine with his dragon, and it was just a nightmare. My poor grots, my 60 little grots stabbed it down to I think about 10 wounds left. Which was pretty good considering I was sitting on mystical and a war shrine, but that's a different conversation. If there's nothing else, Pat, where can people find you if they want to talk more about Khorne?
I think I'm on Facebook. I'm at Generic Gore Pilgrim on Twitter.
And that's going to be that's in the show description if you want to tweet with Pat.
Shout out to all my boys at Measured Gaming from Bendigo. I think my next event is Border Wars. Have you seen you boys there?
I'll be at Border War.
I won't be. I will just be getting back from Vietnam, so it won't quite work out for me.
But the Bendigo boys put on Bendigo boy and girls put on a great event. They put a couple events on a year. So if you are in Australia or can travel to regional Victoria, check out the Bendigo crew. And I believe some of your posse are recording a podcast right now.
As we speak, Bush Radio, gaming.
Bush Radio is and it's a great laugh. MC Dave and Joel the Overlord. So check them out.
Yeah, if now's a good time to get into Khorne.
Yeah.
You won't be afflicted with the sadness of what you've lost if you're a new person.
It's only good things. And Matt, anything you want to say before we wrap up?
Yeah, so no Twitter from me. I think Liam does enough of that for all of us. So if you want to contact me, do so over Facebook. Blades of Khorne Facebook group, really good. It's a very positive group to be a part of. So if you're a new player, if you're an old player, get involved. If you come on and have an issue, people will try and find positive things to say to help find a solution rather than just wallow in pity with you. So it's a really good situation to be in. In terms of shout outs in general, shout out to all the Clan Filth guys as usual. Shout out to the Sydney scene, and also just a few events. Obviously, we've already talked about the Bendigo one coming up, but Sydney Slaughter is always a really good event. Chris Welfare from the Mortally Wounded podcast does it. He's looking to drum up support for it at the moment. It's always great. It's at a great venue this year, I think Padstow RSL in Sydney. They're doing a buffet for food. Chris has done a really good job with custom scenarios. Then we've got Liam's event at Moab, and the coach, I believe, is going to be making some sort of announcement shortly.
2,500
a very exciting, a lot of demon announcement coming your way.
2.5, can't you?
Yes.
It is an awesome game.
Awesome. Well, boys, it's been an absolute pleasure having you both on. Some of the top Khorne players in Australia. You guys have absolutely blown me away with the level of knowledge. And again, this could have gone for hours and hours and hours, but I thank you at this late of night. Guys, I hope you found this valuable. Make sure to join the Khorne group on Facebook. You can find Pat on Twitter. The show notes, again, has his link. If you have any comments, any feedback, any questions, and you want to talk to Matt and you can't find Matt, you can put it in the comment section as well, and I'll pass it on because I get to play Matt quite frequently, and I can give him all the comments and the love that you have for him. And Pat, well, you can just talk to Pat without me. That's it. I'm going to bed. I'm going to bed, guys. You guys have been an absolute pleasure. Thank you, and we've got a couple of more of these shows coming up soon.
All right, awesome. I'll be tuning in. Thanks, Coach.
See you guys.
See you, mate.